following is a special presentation on TNN, the Nashville Network.
Reflections since ASA spring visit.
The only thing I learned is trust no one and make sure you cover your tail.
That's just racing. You can't make everybody happy. I'm here to make myself happy.
Things like that happen. We've already forgotten about it, and it's let's go racing.
The stage is set. The principals are in place. Sauter, Benson, Eddie, all looking to turn a new leaf on a season that has allowed them collectively only one top 5 finish in the last 4 races. But there is a 4th player in this high bank drama, the I-70 Speedway, sneering an invitation to man and machine, test my banks, only to trap them in her black web and grind them down to their last base elements, tearing down the door to the emotions each driver tries to keep hidden deep inside.
The paved high banks. Other than in the deep south, only a few remain now. They first came to America about the turn of the century. They were bicycle tracks in Europe. Of course, they sprouted here as the Super Speedway board paved tracks, believe it or not. Well, Jackson, Mississippi, gone. Dayton, Ohio's passed. Nashville's still around, as is Mason Marin near Bakersfield, California, and the I-70 Speedway in Odessa, Missouri. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Larry Newber, and of course, this is Rob Albright. The banks.
The banks. And bored is one thing you won't be this afternoon on the high-banked paved oval here at I-70 Speedway. I-70 and ASA, a relationship that dates back to 1977. And this track really epitomizes what ASA is all about. 140-mile-an-hour straightaway speeds requiring excellent chassis setup and handling in the corners. In a word, Larry, scary.
We've introduced you to many of the cast of characters, but we've omitted a couple, and they run the gamut of racing emotions. Scott Hansen and Tony Raines.
Well, there's a lot to be said for momentum. The guy that has it riding with him this weekend is Scott Hansen. He's won 3 of the last 4 races, and 5 of the last 6 he's finished no worse than 3rd. That now has vaulted him past Mike Eddy to 2nd in the point standings. Scott had to transfer into this race from the last chance race yesterday. He won't stay back in the pack for very long. At the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of fortune is Tony Raines in car number 25. Well, you talk about bad luck. Lost an engine yesterday in practice. We understand that was the last one the team had. They've got 4 of them sitting on the bench to be rebuilt. He looked around the pits and came up with one. Guess where it came from? Scott Hansen's team. I mean, that just tells you what these guys in ASA are all about. Tony really hoping now that this power plant will be the one that he needs today.
Well, if you've watched these broadcasts, you're about ready to say, well, isn't that Ralph Shaheen guy down in the pits? Yep, he is. And he's standing by with Jay Sauter, and together they have some more reflections of I-70.
For a race car driver, the most intimidating thing is not necessarily what you see in front of you, but behind you. Take a look at my rearview mirror. There's that black number 88, the Good Wrench Pontiac of Mike Eddy, one of the most intimidating sights in all of motorsports. A gentleman who had to deal with that view the last time we were here at I-70 back in April was Jay Sauter. Jay, we've got 5 laps to go. If we're talking about the future, Mike Eddy is behind you once again. How do you handle him this time?
One of the problems we have, Ralph, is we call him the Intimidator. Unfortunately, he's been more like the Exterminator lately and just flat taking us out. I don't think I do anything different. I drive as hard as I can, and I make sure he doesn't get close enough to be a problem.
With a few laps to go, it'll be interesting to find out if Jay Sauter has a chance to even the score, maybe, with Mike Eddy.
34 drivers have auditioned, but there will be only one Best Actor award today at I-70 Speedway. Curtains up next. The 1993 AC-Delco Challenge Series on TNN is brought to you in part by the Win Oil Company, makers of quality automotive car care products. Remember, when it's wins, it works. And And by Mr. Goodwrench, the GM expert at participating GM dealerships. And by Armor All. There is a fountain of youth, and we own the patent. I-70 Speedway, the Missouri 300. Johnny Benson Jr. has already stolen some of the thunder, but the official announcement will be coming up in just a couple of seconds here. You're looking at the starting grid. 34 cars will fire off the day. This could be exciting.
Joining me this afternoon to help get us started is Tim Woody, the operations planner for United Van Lines. Tim, how about getting us cranked up here this afternoon?
Thank you. On behalf of United Van Lines, we're glad to be here today and be part of this great racing series. Gentlemen, let's go racing.
As Carl Sagan would say, billions and billions and billions of horsepower. I think I'm stretching the point a little bit. But anyway, a lot of it does fire up. You can see the front row there. Johnny Benson Jr. on the inside and Mike Eddy on the outside. What an appropriate front row for an American Speed Association race. The weather was threatening last night, but not today.
Well, maybe not threatening in terms of rain, but it's threatening to these race drivers. In fact, with the temperature of 91 degrees and very high humidity, ASA President Rex Robbins issued some very unusual instructions in the drivers' meeting. He said, do whatever you have to do, guys. Forget the rules to channel fresh air into the cockpit of the race car. We don't need anybody getting sick out there today.
We told you at the beginning of the show that this is one of the mythical high banks. 28 degrees in the corners. The straightaways are banked 14 degrees, and there is one unusual aspect of this track that's hard to see on TV.
Yeah, and I think we're going to take a look at it here in a minute. Yesterday, Scott Hansen was in the car with one of our cameramen. We're going down the back stretch, and this is the dog leg in the back straightaway. You may see in the running of the race today as we drop down here into turn number 3, as the cars exit the second corner, that may be a very difficult place to negotiate because you have to set up not for a straightaway, but for a dog leg right in the middle of what is the back stretch.
The groove on some of the high banks is up the racetrack. Here, it's right down on the bottom. We showed you the front row. Let's talk about it one more time and look at the rest of today's starting grid.
Now just one away from a record-tying 10th pole position, Johnny Benson from the point in the Port City Delco Berger Chevrolet, and controversial winner here in the spring and in quest of an 8th championship, Mike Eddy starts outside.
In the Winsoil Thunderbird is Gary St. Amant. His personal best this year was a 2nd. He says he's ready to move up. And Bob Seneker, among his many ASA career wins, 2 have come here at Odessa.
Lots of folks say he'll be ASA's next first-time winner in the Yoder Ford PowerTech Engines Thunderbird. Todd Forbes, and the biggest surprise of qualifying, Roger Avance starts 6th in the All-City Heartwood Chevrolet.
In the Wins Spirit Chevrolet is Russ Gamester. He was the 1991 USAC National Midget Champion. This is career best ASA qualifying performance. And Ken Stauffer, he was 2nd 1 week ago. Many people think he's on the verge of his first career win.
The dominant driver in this race a year ago fell just a few laps short of a win. Jeff Neal in the Splitfire Spark Plugs Ford starts 9th, and Tom Jones, 3rd a week ago, will start 10th in the Felpro Gaskets Pontiac.
The 6th row is going to be shared by a couple of ASA veterans. Glenn Allen Jr., now living in Coopersville, Michigan, a winner once this year, and Jay Sauter. He will win again sometime soon. Row number 7, A.J. Cooper. Glad to see him up there. I felt the last race at Anderson, he had a very good car in the non-money winners race. Didn't get into the main, and Butch Miller on the outside of row number 7. The 8th row, 15th and 16th starting position. The visitor from the west. The High Plains drifter Rick Corelli from near Denver, Colorado visits ASA. Joey Knott out of Columbus, Ohio now, originally from Lima. He's been very good the past couple of weeks. In the 9th row, 17th and 18th start. On the inside, first Steve Holtzhausen and then Randy McDonald. Then Jay Sommers and Dennis Lampman. Remember, he won 2 races ago. The 11th row, the man who's been hot recently, Scott Hansen, and Rick Beebe returns to ASA again. He started the season out in the Caroline Motorsports car. Row number 12. That's the 23rd and 24th starters, Ray Skillman from Indianapolis and Brad Loney in car number 33. He's been fast several times this year. The veteran Harold Fair and Mike Miller in 81 and 18. The numbers are reversed. They share the 13th row. Row number 14, Tony Raines and Tony Roper, a row of Tony the Tigers in cars 25 and 10. Terry Wente and Alec Pinsino from Windsor, Ontario are in row number 15. In car number 37 is the racing principal, Dave Anspaugh, and John Freeman out of road racing. Remember, we saw that bodywork fly completely off that car earlier this year. And then a 17th row, Dennis Vogel, and from California, Brett Bell, in the Wonderbar Casey's General Stores sponsored Thunderbird.
Larry, as we look through the pack, look at that starting grid, 3 drivers of whom we'd like to make particular note. Butch Miller was fastest in practice, missed his scheduled qualifying attempt, and went second round qualifying. As a result, he'll start 14th. Expect him to move up. Car number 53, Scott Hansen. He's been the man on the move. He had fuel pickup problems in practice and qualifying yesterday. There he is, car number 53. He'll start way back in 21st position. And the guy from whom an engine, or a guy to whom an engine was loaned yesterday, Tony Rain, starts a couple of rows back. He'll start 27th. He's 5th in the points in car number 25. Don't expect him to stay back in the back for very long. There he is in the ETR E&L Brokerage Chevrolet.
And just to summarize, because I know many of you pay attention and follow, particularly at this point of the season with only 4 races to go. One more time, the top 5 in points: Benson, Hansen, Eddy, Sauter, and Rains. And as far as the race for the championship, 140 points roughly separate Eddy in 3rd, Hansen in 2nd, and Benson in 1st. So one bad race by any one of those drivers could completely turn around the points race complexion.
Absolutely. And a couple of interesting personal notes here. Where would you like to spend your anniversary? How about at the racetrack? Charlotte Anspaugh isn't even here. They're celebrating an anniversary. Charlotte and driver Dave of car number 37. And Russ Gamestrue, who qualified 7th, he celebrates a 1st anniversary with Bright Angela, who is a very integral part of that Wins Extend racing team.
And indulge us on the TNN ASA broadcast team here. We work very hard. We're very proud of all the people who put this broadcast together. And Lois Broughton, who is the unit manager, she had a birthday yesterday. So happy birthday, and I'm sure she's 21.
And no, she's a little older than that, but not much. And unit manager, that really doesn't address what she does. She makes all of our travel arrangements, and man, I wouldn't want that job for anything.
Big job. Ready to go green this time around. We will go 300 laps on this high bank, paved, half-mile racetrack. Got to confess to a little bit of an insider feeling here. It's my favorite kind of racetrack. I'm very excited whenever I watch, particularly stock cars, on one of these tracks. Benson brings the field around. Eddie's responsible for the outside row. They look toward the starter, and the soup is boiling at the I-70 Speedbowl. Corners 1 and 2, the front row still side by side. Eddie with a bit of an advantage. I'm surprised to see them racing so hard on lap number 1. Benson holds on like a bulldog. Officially, he'll go into the books as the race leader on lap 1.
There's nothing Johnny Benson would like more than to keep Mike Eddy behind him on every lap. You get 5 bonus points for leading a lap. Remember, it was that at I-70 at the end of the year last year. Benson did not lead a lap, and it cost him a championship.
Wasn't that an incredible moment where Johnny Benson Jr. was unable to lead a single lap the last race of the year last season, and he was unable to win the championship because of that.
And there has been early race contact. That's the number 48, the Alanot Raby Thunderbird. And Joe Knott, the 20-year-old driver, you can see that the right front fender is gone from that race car. I'm not sure where it is. I see pieces down on the bottom of the racetrack in turn 3, and there's an ASA official clearing it away. We remain under green.
Wow. Just tense for just a split second. Let me give you a quick rundown here of the top 8 or 10 cars. It's Benson, Eddy, Seneca, St. Amant, Forbes, Russ Gamester running strong in 6th position, Ken Stauffer 7th, in 8th is Roger Abant, 9th is Jeff Neal, and 10th the Zero Hero, Tom Jones.
And look at
a crash in corner number 1. 2 cars involved, Dennis Vogel and Tony Roper. Roper was the first car to get into the outside wall and got away from him. And now a lot of the debris we need to explain that you'll see during a crash at I-70, it's styrofoam. They pad the walls here because there's so frequent wall contact that the feeling is the more absorbing impact material they can put along the walls, the softer the crashes are. And so that's what most of the debris that you're looking at is from.
You never like to see anybody involved in a crash, but most of all, the young driver of car number 10, Tony Roper, in that Child's Tire Ace Signs Chevrolet. He has wrestled very hard through a sophomore season that has just been rife with accidents. He had a crash at Milwaukee, he had a crash at Cayuga, a crash at Salem, and then again in Michigan 300 in practice he crashed. Here it is coming out of turn number 1. You can see Tony is sliding up, and it appeared that Tony simply was trying to find a course of evasive action around another car. I wasn't sure which one it was. Vogel slides into the back end of Roper's car number 10. Now that styrofoam barrier appeared to absorb most of the impact. Let's see if we can tell who it is that's
getting out of shape.
And it looks like Brad Loney's car number 33. Roper trying to anticipate a move to the outside, and it
watch the job Pinsino does. Look at Alec Pinsino.
And he turns down at the bottom, Brett Bell in number 56.
Yeah, Pinsino turns to the right, Bell turns to the left, and they both slide by with no incident. So our first yellow is because of, well, no surprise, a crash on the high banks. I told you it could be exciting, and it has just begun. In Missouri at the I-70 Speedway. If you've been with us all year, you know we've been talking about this I-70 connection, the Interstate 70 connection. The vast majority of the racetracks that ASA runs on seem to be within about 100 miles, and many of them right on I-70. In fact, a lot of America's racetracks, it's not unusual for a major American speedway to be along this major American highway. Hagerstown in Maryland, Jennerstown in Pennsylvania, where ASA runs. There's Dave Anspaugh's car coming to a stop in the pit area. Columbus, Ohio, the Eldora Speedway, where they have all those spectacular sprint car championship races. Indianapolis, of course, is right on I-70. Topeka, we've been there. Even Belleville, where the National Midget Championship is held, and Pikes Peak, they're not too far from the Interstate 70 road to the west.
There's Joe Knott's car number 48, the machine that lost a fender very early in the going. And in just a moment, I think Ralph has some information. He'll be able to let us know exactly what happened. We did not see what caused that. Apparently no significant damage to the Ford Thunderbird of rookie driver, or rather second-year driver, Joe Knott, who many believe is probably the most improved driver on the circuit this season. He's had some real strong runs, including a 5th place finish at Topeka, Kansas in the road race.
Well, we showed you some reflections earlier in this broadcast that Jay Sauter had about I-70. Well, Rex Robbins, the longtime, forever and only president of ASA, more I-70 reflections.
We started here in 1977 with what was known as the Big Six Series. It was 6 races in one season that paid something like $180,000. And it really put ASA on the map at that time.
Rex, as you think back to some of the races here, it probably would be, you'd be hard-pressed going all the way back to 1977 to recollect one with the excitement that the first race this season held.
I remember a race here that stands out in my mind when Larry Degens passed Bob Seneker on the white flag lap to win the World Cup 400. And I guess that race would have to stand out as my all-time favorite.
Of course, Wisconsin driver Larry Degens, a fan favorite of those of you who remember short track stock car racing of seasons past.
Dennis Vogel was involved in that. He's with Ralph.
Dennis, it looked like a hard hit. How did it happen?
Looks like Tony Roper and somebody else got together up in the corner, and they both off to the outside wall there. And when they come down across the track, I tried going to the bottom, then I lost the car and backed into them.
Well, gentlemen, as you can see, this is a piece of the styrofoam, too. It is, just like you said, regular shipping styrofoam. You can see how quickly and easily it breaks up.
All right, getting ready to go back to green as we are working on lap number 13 now begins. The quest for lap 13 begins, and Benson fires off. Eddie second. Seneker is third. Make that a trio of very familiar ASA names. Benson, Eddie, and Seneker. Fourth is still St. Amant, and Todd Forbes is in 5th position.
A disappointing early out for Dennis Vogel in that Triangle 2 Oldsmobile. He finished 3rd in this race last year.
In the middle of the pack, there is Scott Hansen. Remember, Hansen had, for him, was a disappointing qualifying time. He had to work his way to the main by winning the non-qualifiers race yesterday. He started in 21st position, and he is trying to move up as quickly as he can, but also bide his time. He's about right now.
He's in 17th, Larry, very patiently moving up through the field, and we see him testing a slightly higher line than some of the other drivers. I think he knows that he's got to make the high groove work if he's to work his way to the front. Now he goes to work on car number 78, and we've had another spin. Joey Knott is looped down in turn number 1. I don't believe he made any contact.
And in corner number 3, there's Mike Miller. He comes around as the yellow flag comes out. Mike didn't touch anything, and I think he got off the gas so quickly. The banks do strange things to the handling of these cars. When you either accelerate or decelerate quickly, they kind of grab you and put the car out of line. Now, Ralph has been standing by and paying attention as to what's going on with Joey. He's in the headlines again, Ralph.
You know, Larry, it would look to the casual viewer that Joey Knott is struggling here this afternoon. What Joey Knott is doing is getting very aggressive, and it's great to see it. This youngster, who we say is becoming the fastest, most improving driver in the ASA Rookie Series group, is really showing his stuff here this afternoon. The way that he lost that body panel on the right side of the car early on, the first lap, I watched Joe split the difference between 2 cars coming off of turn 2. He is really feeling comfortable behind the wheel of that car. Now all he's got to do is control a little bit of that youthful exuberance that he has here this afternoon and put himself into a good hard charging position, because right now Joey Knott is really starting to feel like he could be a contender.
Point well taken in his last 3 races, 13th, 7th, and 5th. Now we have some unusual pit stops. Bob Seneker comes in. It's much too early for anything routine, although you just never know with a savvy veteran like that. Dennis Lampman has also come to a stop, as has Ray Skillman. So we continue under yellow here at the Odessa Speedway, the I-70 Speedway make that, in Odessa, Missouri. We're watching the Great American Racing Series. Lots of celebrations here this weekend. The celebration of an anniversary. That's an anniversary of somebody's birth. Also, Billy Declan, who's a local racer here, wants to wish Jerry Creason, who's watching from a hospital bed in downtown Kansas City, a very speedy recovery. Man had heart surgery yesterday, and he's watching the race today.
And as we go back to green, Dave Jackson, an ASA official, also wanted us to say hi to his dad, Jack, who's recuperating in a Melbourne, Florida hospital. Hi, Jack.
Back to green. Glenn Allen Jr. in the red-white Leroy Troop number 15. About 12th position right now in a pack of cars. Brad Loney's in that group. There's A.J. Cooper. There is Scott Hansen. We're trying to keep a close watch on him because we certainly anticipate him moving toward the front. And Tony Raines.
Tony started way back in 27th position. Remember, he's got that borrowed engine from the Scott Hansen team. He's all the way up to 19th. He's picked up 8 spots already.
Randy McDonald in that 3rd black, orange, and purple Wins car, number 19. That car, of course, became a part of the Wins family just before the last race. Still the Caroline Wolf Motorsports car. Randy's still the man behind the wheel. He leads the rookie points, but it becomes the 3rd car sponsored by Wins.
We're looking back in the pack. There's Tony Raines in the ETR E&L Brokerage Chevrolet, and you would not have believed the faces of dejection that adorned the crew yesterday as they were ready to pack up and go home. They talked to John Benson, they talked to Alec Pinsino, and finally struck a deal with that Jerry Gunderman team of car number 53 for that motor.
We mentioned that Bob Seneker came into the pits unexpectedly during the last caution flag. By the way, that yellow and blue car right behind him, that's Mike Miller. He, too, came in. Remember, Mike was involved in the spin. Now, Ralph, you went down to the Johnsonville sausage pit of Seneker and checked out the situation.
He had a tire going down, Larry. They changed the left side tires. They did check the tire. It was actually going down, so he's in good shape now. We also checked with Butch Miller's crew, the Liberty Ford team, car number 52. Butch's car was a little loose. They brought him in, put right side tires on, tightened the car up, and it seems to be working right now.
Bob Seneker's got some problems in that Johnsonville sausage, car number 84, as he's fallen well off the pace. Now, he had to work his way through some lap traffic, and Brad Loney is off the pace, and he's coming on pit road exiting turn number 4.
Wow, can this team have any more worse luck than what they've had? They have been very impressive many times this year, and something always happens to that car. Brad is much better, and the team is better prepared and better run than what the results show.
We keep telling him to keep his chin up. He's led each of the last 2 races. There you're looking at Jay Summers in car number 70. We've only seen him about 4 previous times this year. He's driving the Nick Bidd-owned AutoSite Racing Chevrolet. Last year, Glenn Allen Jr. and Jeff Neal drove for this team. He's come from 19th to 9th and is really moving through the pack.
You know, Nick Vitt has had several drivers, Rob, but I'll tell you what, many times drivers that don't run ASA that often get into that car and do well. Remember, Kenny Wilden took one of those Vitt cars, put it on the pole most board in the middle of 1992.
They're always fast. I guess if there's been one question mark, it's been reliability. So we'll continue to monitor Jay Summers and his progress this afternoon. Again, in 9th position.
Benson has a pretty comfortable lead as, again, we're looking at Summers, the Michigan driver. He got out of the throttle just a bit when he was going around lap traffic, allowed Eddie to see him a little more clear, but it didn't last very long. Gary St. Amant continues to run in 3rd, Forbes is 4th, and back to the Hansen situation. Let's clock his climb on the stock market. It's up to 13.
Scott Hansen very patient in pulling through the field. Now, he hasn't led a lot of laps this year, but he has won 3 of the last 4 races, so his plans this afternoon right on schedule. He said he was going to be patient early. We checked with Bob Seneker's team, and crew chief down there says there's really nothing wrong with that car at all. He's just biding his time.
All of the regulars seem to be running pretty smoothly at this point. Benson now working his way around the Windsor driver, Alec Pinsino. Remember, Alec crashed so severely here in the spring race when he collided right here in the home stretch with Ray Skillman, tearing the bodywork completely off of Skillman's car. And Alec got way up in the air and knocked both cars out of the race.
Benson now putting another lap on Dave Anspaugh. That lap for Johnny, 18.12 seconds. Now, that's about a second off his qualifying time, but significantly faster than everyone else on the racetrack.
We have talked about Joey Knott. Look at this. See the black and orange car, the Wins Chevrolet now in this one, the Wins Lumina? That's Russ Gamester. By far, this is his best performance in his ASA career. He is qualified in the top 10. He has practiced in the top 10 this weekend. And right now, he's not only 5th, but he's a challenging 5th position. You can see that he's giving Todd Forbes all that he can handle. Russ Gamester turning in his best performance so far in a car with fenders on it. Can't see the tires.
I'll tell you, he's running extremely well. He had an equally good run going last week, but it ended prematurely. Dave Anspaugh, car number 37. This is not the way you want to celebrate an anniversary. Charlotte, we're sorry that we have to show you that view of your husband, Dave, as he has just fought engine problems most of the 1993 season. Looks like his afternoon is over as Benson continues to blitz through the field.
And for all you kids watching in Sturgis, Michigan, do your homework, stay off the streets, and you're still among our favorite people.
The problem for Brad Loney's car is an overheating engine in the number 33 machine, so he is going to be suffering through a long day as the crew tries to cool the motor down to get him back out for points.
All right, we've documented for you the first 5. 6 right now is Jeff Neal as we continue to watch the progress or the lack of progress that the crew is experiencing on Brad Loney's car. 7th is Kent Stauffer, our fastest Thunderbird in ASA consistently this year. In qualifying, that is. 8th is Roger Avance. He's got a fellow Coloradoan racing with him this race in the person of Rick Corelli. 9th is Jay Sommers as that drive to the front continues. And in 10th, running pretty comfortably. They had their brand new engine. They had a lot of confidence for this race before the weekend started, is Glenn Allen Jr. Easily within striking distance. Sauter is 11th. In 12th right now is Rick Corelli. 13th is Hansen. 14th is A.J. Cooper. 15th, Holzhausen.
Well, you're taking a look at car number 5, the split-fire spark-plug Thunderbird of Jeff Neal. Remember, he came within a few laps of winning here last season. He has come all the way to 4th position as he makes his way to the front. Russ Gamester's car number 11 is off the pace and coasting down the backstretch. The Winds Extend Chevrolet not under power. Jeff Neal, meanwhile, continues to bullet toward the front. That Ford Thunderbird is up to 4th position.
Oh, boy. I find the words difficult. It's always disappointing when anybody drops out. When a man appears to be having the best race of his career in a particular division, it's particularly devastating. Now, Ralph is making his way down there, and he will be there in a couple of seconds, I am told. And they've opened up the hood. Looks like they're into the engine compartment. Apparently not a drivetrain problem or anything like that. Doesn't look to be electrical. Definitely power plant oriented.
It's hard to tell because there was really no smoke from the back end of the car. That's usually an indication that there has not been internal damage to the engine itself, so we'll wait for Ralph's report. And yeah, he's led every lap. Car number 21, Johnny Benson. But here's the man we continue to watch. It's black cars running 2nd and 3rd, and the one in 3rd now is very rapidly closing in on the second place car, number 88 of Mike Eddy. Jeff Neal having a very strong run this afternoon. He's part of a brand new team for 1993, one of several drivers in such a situation. And we understand there's been some real disappointment on the part of car owner Don Finetti. Jeff feeling some pressure. He's certainly got the talent to win, and it's showing early today.
It's always a question when you watch any division of motor racing, who will be the next new winner? I'd certainly put my money on the 5 car, not because of his performance today. This is the interval, by the way, between first and second. It's now down to 2.2 seconds as Jeff Neal puts away another one. And this is a big card. He puts away one of the aces.
In the last several weeks, Jeff has come on strong. A third-place finish in the Players 500 at Canada, and a third behind Dennis Lampman and Kent Stauffer in the Michigan 300, or rather Scott Hansen in the Michigan 300.
Ralph, now I understand, has some information on Gamester.
Larry, the problem for Russ Gamester was one of those 25-cent pieces. A wire on the ignition box came loose. They opened up the hood, replugged up the wire. Russ Gamester just re-entered the racetrack a few laps down.
Well, I didn't really think it was an internal engine problem. Usually you see great plumes of smoke. They simply weren't there. By the way, sorry, Steve Holzhausen. It was Holzhausen second in the Michigan 300. Jeff Neal finished third after coming from 2 laps down. And Neal, it looks like on the track, maybe closing on Vincent ever so slightly. But Vincent is still the guy in control in the early going. He's led all 53 laps thus far.
You know, Rob, in that this race is going to go 300 laps, and if Neal really does have a good car, we've seen him in this posture before with excellent race cars, I don't know that I would want to pass Benson. I don't know that I'd want to show Benson what I have. I think I would just follow him if I was better.
Well, you obviously don't know Jeff Neal.
Well, I do.
Listen, if Jeff, I think you may have been setting me up. If Jeff can get there and can get around, he will do it. Make no mistake about that. And we've got problems in turn 3. 3 cars together. John Freeman spins. So does A.J. Cooper. Also involved in driving through is car number 19, Randy McDonald.
Brett Bell has spun also.
Yeah, Brett Bell came late into the fray. Cooper still sitting up on the banking, but I don't think any of those machines were damaged, Larry. It happened right mid-pack with some of the leaders on rushing, and I don't think there was any contact between any 2 race cars.
Well, I saw the winds, black, purple, and orange, getting sideways there, and I thought, oh, it had to be among the leaders, but that was Randy McDonald. I think he gathered it, got back up, and got out before the leaders came around. Now, Brett Bell was unfortunate because the Wonder Bar Casey's General Store Ford was having a good race. He had moved from virtually dead last. He dropped back to take a breather at the start. He moved up to about 20th, and he was working very hard, battling on the track with Seneca at that moment, by the way, and it seemed to start in front of him. He had to spin to miss, and he stopped, did lose a lap, unfortunately.
As Benson crosses the start-finish line, Glenn Allen Jr. and Todd Forbes among lead lap automobiles make their way onto pit road, and Scott Hansen just now comes on pit road, exiting turn 4, and Ralph is there.
We're with Todd Forbes' crew. As you can see, they're going to change left side tires. Remember, with the AC-Delco Challenge Series, you're only allowed to change 2 tires during a yellow flag pit stop. So they will take care of the left side. Scott Hansen's crew takes tires on the right side of the car. That car was struggling a little bit. Hansen will not get out in front of the Noah Yoder Ford of Todd Forbes. Forbes will lead him down pit lane.
Hansen, by the way, despite his problems, has been able to remain on the lead lap. So this yellow flag was, I guess you would call it, fortuitous for Mr. Hansen, who has been the scourge of the American Speed Association in the last month. Scott Hansen still on the lead lap.
I don't need a whole lot of money. I don't need
If you've been reading Speed Sport news for the last 20 years, you know this track was once covered with dirt. It was pavement first, and they put dirt on it, and they took the dirt off and went back to pavement. It was one of the main stops in the USAC Sprint Car Trail, and one of the most memorable nights. Rex Robbins was talking about his fondest memory of this racetrack was a night in the summer of 1973 when 3 drivers crashed out of this park, Lee Kunzman, Charlie Masters, and Bill Puterball, and each of them looked like a near fatal, but fortunately all those drivers survived.
Well, we're just a lap away from returning to green. There's Brad Loney standing outside his race car. Brad did want to remind all of you out there in television land that the flood-ravaged victims of the Midwest still are way behind the 8 ball in terms of having the resources financially that they need. There's a flood aid hotline, 800 number that was painted on the back of his race car. We'll give that to you now. It's 1-800-462-9029. 1-800-462-9029. Don't forget the ravaged victims of the floods in the Midwest. They still need your help.
We are back to green, beginning lap number 62. Reminding you one more time, we will go 300 circuits around this high bank, half-mile oval, 150 miles, this 1993 hot summer afternoon in the plains of Missouri. John Benson Jr. just catapults way out front. Running in second place continues to be Jeff Neal. Eddie is third, same amount as fourth, and is fifth. And in fifth is Kent Stauffer. Now, Ralph is standing by in the pits with an update on the car dealer from Indianapolis.
Ray Skillman's number 27 was parked behind the wall. Ray doing the gentlemanly thing. The car was bottoming out underneath, bringing the shocks all the way down to the bottom of the ground. And Ray figured better to bring the car in than tear up somebody else's equipment.
And the body is still on it.
Yeah, Larry alluding to the first race of the season, which was right here at I-70 Speedway, an early race crash involving Ray Skillman. The bodywork literally flipped off of that race car. It wasn't attached, apparently, as well as it should have been. And the car was badly damaged, but Ray fortunately was not. And again this afternoon, a short day for Skillman.
I ran down the first 5 for you. The Denver, Colorado driver in the bright red number 75, Roger Avance, is 6th. Jay Sommers having a very interesting race. He has crept up to 7th position. Just how strong will he be all afternoon? Very interesting. 8th is Jay Sauter. In 9th is the 06 car, the other Denver driver, the High Plains drifter, Rick Corelli. And in 10th is Steve Holtzhausen. Now, other cars that have remained on the lead lap, Tony Raines in the number 57 car this weekend. It's not the normal driver we're accustomed to seeing, Larry Phillips behind the wheel, but Rick Beebe, who started out this season. Now, Ralph on Jay Sauter.
Larry, an interesting point about the number 1 car. The motor that Jay ran so strongly with here last time we were here in April was a motor that gave Jay all the problems yesterday. That motor was yanked out of the car. This is a brand new engine in the number 1 engine bay. Jay does not necessarily know how good this motor will be. He's hoping it's as good as the last one was the last time he was here.
Well, a couple of things have happened while we were listening to Ralph. The yellow flag is coming out. Could be an interesting break for Steve Holtzhausen, although the leaders flash past, and Steve Holtzhausen, who normally runs among the leaders in an American Speed Association race, was left in the pits. A.J. Cooper, not Jim Cooper, A.J. Cooper, the man from Clay Como, had also made a stop. Now there's Holtzhausen in the Baker Enterprises of Wisconsin machine, and Holtzhausen, who's won so many races in the upper Midwest in late models and stock cars, drops a lap. Cooper dropped a lap. I believe the reason for the yellow flag was simply a track maintenance situation.
What a difference a year can make. Steve Holtzhausen is a rookie in 1992. Though he didn't win a race, he had a number of top 5 finishes, eventually winning the Rookie of the Year and finishing 5th overall in points. This year, he's way down in 18th, and his best run of the year was a 2nd in the Michigan 300. Ralph, what more can you tell us about the situation for Steve?
He had a right rear tire going down, Rob, and they brought the 78 Baker Motorsports car in, changed that tire, and sent him back out.
We also noticed that Gary St. Amant will be coming on pit road in car number 7. He's had an uneventful afternoon thus far, and just before the caution was displayed, right behind St. Amant, Kent Stauffer was very definitely off the pace in car number 90. So we'll try to give you the reason for Stauffer's problems. Again, no indication as to whether it might be engine, electrical, or maybe right side tires. Ralph, what do you know about it?
It is tires on Kent Stauffer's cars. The number 90 comes down pit lane. They will change right side tires. They will also check the air pressure on the left side. Crew putting into topping off the fuel, changing those right side tires, sweeping off the debris under the grill, and they'll turn Kent Stauffer back out. Gary St. Amant, meantime, is down at the other end of pit lane getting his car serviced. Tires will be going on that car as well.
Now, St. Amant stop apparently a little longer than Stauffer since he's still on pit road. Sorry, Larry.
Mr. ASA librarian.
Oh, watch out. Watch out.
What do you
Challenge
think?
has been issued.
A routine stop for St. Amant, as you see his teammate, one of 2 teammates, Russ Gamester, is also in the pits. Remember, Russ had to come in with that problem. Now they're at the rear end. That does not look like an ignition problem.
No, it does not. And in answer to your question, yeah, routine stop for Gary St. Amant. Definitely. 1 stop is mandatory. We'd again like to remind viewers, if this is your first AC-Delco Challenge Series event, in the interest of cost containment, you can only change 2 tires on any caution flag stop. So expect St. Amant probably to make one more stop before the race is over. Fuel, not really that much of an issue because you can go about 100 miles or about 200 laps theoretically on a single tank.
But he's the only one who has stopped. Now, what is he hoping, that the next time the rest of the leaders stop, he gets to stay out?
Well, he's not really the only one that stopped, because a number of other drivers have, including Kent Stauffer. Now, we did talk to Kent yesterday. There was some speculation that maybe Kent was running an entire racing season with a single kinetic power plant. Kent, tell us, is that the case?
A necessity. Just, you know, we've never had a huge budget. We're comfortable. Kinetics is helping me. Flex Technologies is helping me, and a combination, and I've just learned to stretch it for all it's worth. I mean, it's been beneficial. You know, I don't waste. I make the most of what I got.
Rob, you know, this weekend a lot of teams have brought out their refreshened engines. A lot of engines got tired over the first 11-12 races of the season, and I know Tom Jones' power plant is new. It's refreshened, I should say. Gary St. Amant's came back this week. Leroy Troop, Dave Taylor, and Glenn Allen Jr. This was an engine they had actually set aside for this race. So a lot of the teams got their wares back from their engine builders, and I think there's a lot of new engines out there. And I get a feeling if we see one go away, there are going to be a lot of long faces in whatever pit that happens in. Well, talking about pits, guess what? Ralph's got yet another report.
This is what the problem was for us, Gamester. This is a broken power steering belt. As you can see, the crew is working on the rear end of the car, putting the new power steering belt on the car. They already looped it on. They just got to tighten it down to get it fit properly on that part of the car in the back end. If it doesn't work, Russ can still run. Of course, he just will not have power steering, which makes a hot day at I-70 even longer.
Well, for all those of you who are Wynn's Oil fans, it was a great day. He had his time in the sun, so to speak. Over the first 25 laps, Russ Gamester was definitely one of the top 10 cars and really appeared to be in a position to challenge for top 5 status today, and it's most unfortunate that the race ends early.
As we continue to watch that battle for second between Jeff Neal and Mike Eddy, the team cars to Gamester still doing very well indeed. Car number 19, Randy McDonald's moved into the top 10 for the first time today, and St. Amant now working his way back through the field after that pit stop.
Hey, let's talk about this Jay Sommers guy. Jay is having just one wing-ding of a race here. There he is in that bright red number 70. He's not only fourth, Rob, he appears to be faster than Eddie and Neal.
He's strong. We used to see Jay periodically in the late 80s show up at the occasional ASA race with his own race car, his own family-owned race car. And I constantly ask him, Jay, when are you going to come full-time at ASA? There he is right now. This is as close as he has been, I think, to a full-time ride. Nick Vitt, who has campaigned racers on a full-time basis over the last several seasons, may be looking at going full bore with Summers for 1994. I personally hope that happens. He's a nice kid and a very good race driver as he's in 4th position.
Well, Sommers has also been doing some test driving for the Leroy Troop team this year, I believe. And he did have a top 10 finish a year ago when he qualified 7th and came home 6th at Toledo. Racetrack similar in configuration to this, but shorter.
Larry, I am amazed at how strong Johnny Benson is. In fact, I wonder if he's using the right strategy, setting such a blistering pace. We've already seen a couple of cars overheating, and with 91-degree ambient temperatures and 80% humidity, I think more engines are going to get warm before the day concludes.
Had a long talk with Gary St. Amant before this race began about that very subject. What he said, what really kills you at I-70, and the banks do play a role in this also, a hot sun, we're right out here in the middle of the prairie, essentially, are the yellow flags. He said, as long as we're green, we're reasonably comfortable in the cockpit, and the cars are okay. It's not the optimal situation. It's not a nighttime race, but what really kills us are the yellows. And you know, Larry, gosh darn it, he said there's always a lot of yellows when we come to Odessa.
There's a battle for 7th position. Harold Fair taking the spot away from Rick Corelli as they drop down into turn number 1. We haven't talked about Harold. He's having a good run and having, in fact, a good season. Comes in 6th in points at this juncture. He's a good story too, Larry. We haven't seen him in some time in ASA, and this is his first time in this new ASA race car, and he's adapted very, very quickly.
Rick Corelli, by the way, has enormous experience in a stock car. He's run successfully on the 1 mile pavement out in Phoenix, Arizona. And one of his favorite races is the Copper Classic, and he is barnstorm, which is what we would have called it in the 1950s or 60s. I guess you're an outlaw of sorts if you do it in the 70s and 80s. But Corelli has barnstormed all around the country, running in several divisions. And frankly speaking, he's always been a driver that I expected to land in one of the major leagues of stock car racing, and maybe this will be one of those breakthrough weekends for him.
He just may have landed. He made it known yesterday that he is very seriously contemplating a run for next year's Pat Shower Memorial Rookie of the Year Award, which will pay a $40,000 bonus to its winner. Jeff Neal is losing a bit of ground in car number 5. The split-fire Ford Thunderbird is dropping off the pace just a bit as Jay Sauter picks up a position. Sauter now moves into 4th. Right behind him comes the 75 machine of Roger Avance. And keep an eye on Jeff Neal because he is fading ever so slightly.
Yeah, Neal has really dropped off, and that's unfortunate because I think he was the best car in the track over the first 50 laps of the race. Now, like he was reading our mind.
He usually does.
Yes, Ralph Shaheen has got a response to all this. Ralph?
Well, we were putting it all together. We'll get to Chris Bradley in a second. The problem for Jeff Neal is a broken power steering belt. Same thing as Russ Gamester. Now, Chris Bradley, are you concerned about this strategy that your boy Johnny Benson Jr. is running? Is he going too hard too soon?
No, he's being real smooth with the car. The car's working really good. He says the car's fine. The heat's not bothering Johnny at all. He's just pacing himself, so we're doing real well.
But do you think you'll have enough left? I mean, how much stress can one of these ASA cars take on a hot day like this?
As long as the motor stays cool, you know, and you don't have a leak in the radiator or anything, you're going to be all right.
The guessing game's beginning.
The second-generation driver, John Benson Jr. He's called Junior because there was a John Benson, and he was himself one of the kings of the high banks. John Benson Sr. He ran super modifieds on the high banks, and at one time held the all-time world record for speed on a high bank half-mile racetrack. That was set at Winchester.
There was and still is a John Benson Sr., and he's an integral part of this racing team. He's never shy about telling the crew and Johnny exactly what he thinks would help to improve the team, and Johnny is very quick to listen to that.
Well, many of the visitors are having a great day here at Odessa in the American Speed Association this year. That guy is not a visitor, Mike Eddy. That is Mr. ASA. John Benson Jr., I suppose you could almost call him Mr. ASA of the past 2 seasons, but Eddy is a driver that I felt has grown up with ASA, and they both have matured together. More than any other figure, I think Mike Eddy has spread the gospel of the American Speed Association.
Check the gap now, first to second. It's Benson, Eddy, but now Jay Summers is right behind Mike, 3.4 seconds at this point in the race. Behind them, as we continue to watch that second running car number 88 of Mike Eddy. Up to 4th is Jay Sauter. 5th, hanging tough, is Roger Avance. Harold Fair is 6th. Rick Corelli 7th. Randy McDonald is 8th. Jeff Neal has just lost 9th to Dennis Landman. 11th is Glenn Allen Jr. 12th is the 07 of Todd Forbes. And Scott Hansen, who stopped early, is now struggling back in the pack in 14th position. The interval again. It was 3.4 seconds the last time. A little bit of smoke, it looked like, from Benson that time by, but the margin has stretched by 0.2 of a second on successive laps. You really want to keep an eye on car number 21. Johnny had a loose rear end plate in that car last weekend, and he lost some smoke and fluid through the course of the race, but you don't like to see that this early.
Also want to give another call to Joey Knott. We documented his trials and tribulations earlier in this race. He has been able to remain on the lead lap. Joey Knott unofficially about 13th or 14th as we watch this seemingly developing situation with race leader, the Port City Berger Chevrolet number 21, the man who has dominated the speed runs in ASA the last 2 seasons.
Benson came in with a 130-point lead in the standings over Scott Hansen, 139 over Mike Eddy. Now, at about 5 points per position, this could be very, very serious for Johnny Benson. We could have a real points race if this is a significant problem.
John Benson has not won a race over the last 4. He last won in Calgary. Ralph, what do you think? You got any information, or is it a guess?
Larry, right now, Chris Bradley, as you watch him taking a look at his driver, Johnny Benson Jr., circulating the racetrack, is in conversation with John. They're talking over the headsets about what the problem could be. They're going to wait as long as they possibly can, of course, hoping for a yellow to bring him in and take a look. As soon as Chris gets some better information about what it is, they'll come down to us. Right now, Johnny has no idea from inside the car as to what it could be.
As we watch John Benson Jr., a very sad news report for all of our Illinois and Jeff Neal fans. The split-fire Thunderbird has pulled into the pit area, and Jeff parallel parks it down there. It was not a pit stop. Jeff Neal, who looked like a potential race winner again, suffers disappointment.
There's the battle for fourth position between Jay Sauter and Roger Avance. Roger finished 29th here in April, has made only one other ASA appearance in 1993, started 42nd and finished 19th at Milwaukee, so his run at this point in the race, Larry, is a real surprise.
You know, I was about to say, you know why he comes out here? Because he's close to home, but you know what? Denver's still not close to here. But Roger Avance having a great race, Jay Sommers having a great race, Rick Corelli is very much in it. What if one of the three of them would win this American Speed Association race? It would be classified as an upset, but all three of these drivers have the potential. Jay Sauter, West Salem, Wisconsin, there in the black and green Chevrolet. He has run near the front of the American Speed Association for the past 2 seasons. He's almost won this race, as a matter of fact. Remember the spring? He does not hope for a repeat. Throughout its history, the state of Michigan has dominated the personality of the American Speed Association. And no matter who's at the top, and that chair seems to change periodically, it seems like more often than not, unless you're from Batesville, Arkansas, it's somebody from Michigan. And a Michigander, as I used to call him as a graduate of Ohio State University, up front again today.
Johnny Benson is leading. However, the problems continue to perplex even his crew chief. They think it is leaking rear end grease on car number 21, and that was the problem last week.
Now, Jay Sauter, we've mentioned so many times how well he has run in an ASA race. Watch what happened to him while we were away during that last commercial break. There is Coloradoan Roger Avance going to the high side of Jay. That's Rick Corelli making it 3 wide, almost going into the high-speed corner 1 and 2. Harold Fair, the veteran, twice he's been runner-up in ASA season points. He goes to the high side of Jay, and Jay has let it slip away. It's retrograde action right now for the young driver from Wisconsin.
Well, there's Roger Avance in car number 75. Since that taped pass a moment ago, both Harold Fair and Rick Corelli have gotten around Avance, and there's Harold Fair, who has now moved into the 4th position and is very rapidly closing in on Jay Sommers in car number 70. Harold's best run this year, a 5th place finish. In fact, he's done it twice, early in the season at Columbus and then on the road course in Brainerd.
Benson has definitely gotten off of the pace. There's obviously a lot of attention being given to the what is suspected to be rear end grease leaking. He has slowed perceptibly. Mike Eddy is moving in on him. The 3rd running car is quite a distance back. That's Jay Sommers. He got caught in traffic, but look at the situation with Benson. I talked to a number of people in addition to St. Amant before this race, and no one was conceding to him, Rob, but they all felt that Benson's number was up. He's been so strong this year, and he's gone a month and a half without winning. They kind of thought he was the favorite to win today.
He's due for the win. Now, Scott Hansen, who had been the man with the greatest momentum coming in, has gone a lap down to Benson, now would like to get it back. There is Jay Sommers giving up 3rd position to Harold Fair and 4th to Rick Corelli.
So Corelli continues his hunt on the trail. The trailblazer, Rick Corelli, he's holding 4th. Others go faster and slow down. Corelli maintains a constant speed.
Behind this group of automobiles, Todd Forbes, Jay Sauter, Joe Knott, Bob Seneker, and Glenn Allen Jr. all running right together on the racetrack and still on the lead lap, but about 2/3 of a lap behind Johnny Benson Jr., who continues to display an increasing amount of smoke from the rear end of car number 21.
We're looking at the number 2 Clark Oil sponsored car of Terry Wenny. Here's a former USAC open wheel star. And Terry and his car owner, John Miller, wanted to make mention today about the Big Brothers and Big Sisters program in Greater St. Louis. They are very actively involved in that, and we understand it has fostered a lot more new fans for the sport of auto racing, and in particular the American Speed Association. The race shop facility is near O'Fallon, Missouri, and we understand that the Big Brothers and Big Sisters, along with their brothers and sisters, attend there regularly and are now beginning to attend several American Speed Association races. So kids, we thank you for your support, and your race car is out there like it has been just about every race for the last 2 seasons, soldiering around, and Terry Wenny has proven to be a very viable entry in the American Speed Association. So John Benson continues to lead, but he also continues to smoke. Can Eddie catch him? Can Benson finish? Can either one of them beat I-70? Punching the remote control or eating, Mike Eddy was working, and it was a successful labor. He has taken over the #1 position. 3 career wins at Odessa once this season already. Here's what it looked like when Mike Eddy caught the smoking John Benson.
Eddie just simply cruises to the high side of the racetrack. John checks the rearview mirror, sees the good wrench Pontiac coming, and does what he really hated to do. Gives him racing room and allows Mike to take over the top position. There's Benson, continues around the racetrack at a much more leisurely pace, but he had a big enough lead, Larry. He's still in second position, about half a straightaway ahead of car number 81, Harold Fair. Cars that we're showing now behind the wall, for those of you who are fans of some of the drivers that we haven't mentioned in some time. Car number 10, Tony Roper, the 93 of Alec Pinsino, car number 33, and that is Brad Loney's car, the 27 of Ray Skillman, car number 57, Rick Beebe, 5 of Jeff Neal, 51 of Dennis Vogel. And Ralph, what is going on with Benson at this point?
Well, let's ask his crew chief. Chris, what's the plan?
Well, I think we got a slight oil leak. We're kind of hoping for a caution. Come in and change some tires, take a look at the car. If we got a slight leak, we'll probably bring him in again and try to fix the leak.
Any idea where that leak could be coming from, and how do you fix it?
We think it might be in the valve cover. There's a breather cover there. We think that might be it.
There's your yellow. Here it comes. We'll stay right here.
All right, almost like he orchestrated it. Chris Bradley, that is, a fellow Michigan driver. John Benson keeping up, or make that Bob Seneca keeping up with that theme, loses control very uncharacteristically. Coming out of corner number 2, yellow flutters, and watch for John Benson, the longtime race leader. Oh, and trouble in corner number 3. Sauter's come together with Jay Sommers. He was racing with Randy McDonald for some reason down the back straightaway. McDonald and Sauter came together. They skated up the racetrack and banged into Jay Sommers. So our 3rd and 4th running cars involved in an incident under the yellow flag.
That is a very unusual occurrence, because in ASA, when the yellow flag is displayed, save for the last lap of the race, it's yellow immediately all the way around the racetrack. You don't race back to the start-finish line. I don't know, that was a very strange turn of events on the backstretch.
Sure to be a controversial moment. There's race leader now, Mike Eddy, coming in. As the crew swarms over the machine, you see the GM Goodwrench shirted crew go to the outside, and on the inside of that car is Ralph Shaheen.
As you can see, they've already changed the right side tires on the Mike Eddy crew. He is out. Benson's crew looking underneath the left rear end of the car is where the crew is up underneath that left rear tire, taking a look, trying to secure whatever is come loose on that car to stop the leaking. Chris Bradley handling the fluids in as they try to get rid of the problems in the rear end of this machine. They put the tires back on the car, and he will go back out. Hopefully, no, he will go down a lap. They held him just before the leaders came by. They held him, and Jay Sauter snuck through as the stop sign was out. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Sauter. There goes the green, and now Johnny Benson Jr. returns to the racetrack.
Ralph, a lot of scrambling around down there. We had a big-time traffic jam in pit road. Glenn Allen Jr. seemed to be slow getting off the mark. The car apparently was stalled, rolling along the pit area. A lot of people jammed up behind him. and then they separate. And here's a look at that incident involving Sauter, and that's Sommers up against the wall at this point.
Again, we were on the scene maybe a little bit after the altercation actually began. No indication as to what might have started.
Now here's that. See, there's Glenn Allen Jr. right in the middle of your picture. There goes Sauter around on the high side. That's McDonald. He passes through, but Allen cannot get that car to refire. Now the Wins crew of Mac McClellan comes down and tries to help out, tries to get the car fired back up.
There's Jay Sauter's car number 1. Damage to the left rear quarter panel of that race car, but it looks like it's all superficial.
Well, many drivers now have lost a lap, and we are checking to see just exactly how many of them, but the standings are really scrambled. We'll check on that. Come back after this. The Great American Racing Series and this telecast is a copyrighted production of Group 5 Sports, a division of Group 5 Sales Incorporated. Any use, rebroadcast, or other transmission of this telecast without the written consent of Group 5 Sports is prohibited. Still under yellow at Odessa in the middle of Missouri. Well, not actually in the middle of Missouri. We're on the western end here, are we not?
I think so.
Yes.
Close enough.
Yep.
Johnny Benson remains on pit road in car number 21. He's been in for a couple of laps. And after that jam on pit road, as best we can tell you, Mike Eddy is the leader. Harold Fair now runs in 2nd position. Roger Avance 3rd. Dennis Lampman has moved to the 4th spot. Gary St. Amant 5th. Jay Sauter 6th. Car number 25, Tony Raines with a borrowed engine in 7th position. 20-year-old Joe Knott runs 8th. And in 9th position, the 07 of Todd Forbes.
Well, what happened during that traffic jam is a lot of people, including the 2 Denver drivers who were doing so well, Roger Avance and Rick Corelli, lost a lap being caught in the traffic jam. I think most of you know that part of the approach of ASA is V6 in the engines.
In 1978, a group of ASA drivers from Wisconsin pooled their knowledge of racing to try and come up with a cost-effective answer to the horsepower question. The result was a very reliable motor that produced a tremendous amount of power. The key was its 9-to-1 compression ratio.
Originally, they were considerably cheaper to build, too, and as a matter of fact, they're still cheaper today. But the beauty of the 9-to-1 is in the maintenance. The motors last about twice as long.
By the early 1980s, the 9-to-1 V6 was the engine of the American Speed Association. Over the following years, the competitors and the sanctioning body have worked together to develop what is arguably the motor of the future for stock car racing.
It's been the motor of the future for a long time. We've run it for many, many years. And it just makes a lot of sense to prolong the life of an engine and to lower the cost of keeping that engine running.
Back to green at I-70 Speedway. Again, reminding you, many of the drivers who were among the top 5, top 10, lost laps during the last pit stop, including Roger Evans, Rick Corelli, and Glenn Allen Jr. Now, all of those drivers will be racing very hard to see if they can create an opportunity for them to make up those lost laps. That will be difficult because Mike Eddy is at the vanguard, and he's tough to pass when conditions are just normal.
Johnny Benson finally refires and pulls back onto the racetrack. And Mike Eddy now will hope that that car number 88 lasts to the finish with Scott Hansen being a lap down. With Johnny Benson having his problems, Eddy is back in the chase for the championship.
Harold Fair runs in 2nd position. In 3rd is the...
car number 9, I think, of Dennis Lampman.
Lampman is now 3rd because 75 is a lap down, and Gary St. Amant creeps back up to 4th position. Remember, he pitted by choice out of sequence early on.
Behind Gary St. Amant, Jay Sauter runs 5th and 6th position, car number 25, Tony Raines.
Well, coming up on this lap around, the driver will be awarded the Wins Halfway Challenge. Remember, that's an award to every one of these televised races from the Win Oil Company out in Azusa, California. And coming up this time around, the Wins Halfway Challenge is going to go to, no, not Scott Hansen, it's Mike Eddy. Darth Vader wins another one. The winner of this week's Wins Halfway Challenge is not Darth Vader, Mike Eddy. He wins $500 from Wins for leading at the halfway point of today's race.
Assuming approximately 5 points per position, Mike Eddy came in 140 down or so to Johnny Benson Jr. 5 times, I don't know what, spot to make up 140 points, about 17 positions on the racetrack. So he's got his work cut out for him to catch him. And Benson runs well, but continues to smoke. Ralph?
The problem for Johnny Benson Jr. was that he blew the oil cooler. So what they did was they put a union between the two lines. Now he's actually running basically without an oil cooler.
Yellow flag in corner number 1. Californian Brett Bell from Vacaville, California, in the Wonder Bar, Casey's General Stores Thunderbird. Loops around on the high side of corner number 1. Now I saw no contact with any other car, nor was there contact with the outside wall. So Brett Bell, who has been running the Southwest Tour out in California. That's a series of cars very similar to ASA cars, but obviously running in Southern California, who has attempted to stake his claim in ASA this year, loses there in corner number 1. There he slides in. He gets bumped.
Now Brett Bell gets tapped. I think it was Dennis Lampman's car number 9. Not serious contact, but enough to send Brett Bell spinning. And a number of cars on the lead lap are back on pit road. Ralph?
One of those cars will be Mike Eddy, the GM Goodwrench Pontiac, making a pit stop here. They'll put tires on the other side of the car, and they will top off the fuel. You can see them also spraying water inside to cool down the radiator portion of the car. It's probably getting a little hot inside there. Mike pouring water down the back in front of his driver's suit. The crew will drop him down off the jacks, and Mike Eddy will return to the action. Let me update you on a few other drivers who you might not have seen out on the racetrack lately. The number 5 of Jeff Neal, they're not sure what went wrong with the split-fire car. It just stopped rolling. The number 75 of Roger Avance, Roger physically just got sick. He is out of the car, sitting in the shade, cooling down.
And during all of that, there was a traffic jam again on pit road. Let's go back in time for a couple of minutes and check that one out as Benson comes in to stop. Now here's the replay on what happened on pit road coming up. There you see, appears to be, whoa, that's Jay Sutter coming out, making contact with Dennis Lampman, so he's had a perilous couple of laps here.
Yeah, he has. Jay Sutter may be wondering, what do I have to do to tame this racetrack? Benson has been back on pit road now. Will rejoin the race in car number 21. Number of laps off the pace.
Isn't it ironic, Rob, how consistent with last year John Benson's junior year this year has been? Same thing happened last year. Out of the box, started winning all the races, has all these poles, and the last half of the season just deteriorates on him, and not through any fault of the team. It's just misfortune.
However, I think he's a little bit different frame of mind this year than he was last year. At that juncture, he had not been that close to winning a championship. This year, he can taste it. Don't write him off yet. He is 10 laps down. Probably will leave here. If still in the points lead, it will have shrunk significantly, but still with 4 races to go. Benson, I think, has got a shot at the championship.
300 lap race, 160 laps are now down. We are also down to 8 drivers in the lead lap. We'll recap that when we return. There is a very hard laboring camera crew. Oh, the waves are not very energetic. Now, we were out in that sun at the beginning of this race, and my heart does go out to them. It is very sultry out there, very difficult working conditions, and I think those of you at home in the air-conditioned family rooms, you really don't have a sense of how difficult it is to bring this race to you. Very tough conditions today, guys, and you are doing your normal excellent job. As we go back to green, some 10, 11 laps past the midpoint of this race, let's take a look at the mid-race recap for today's Missouri 300 featuring the American Speed Association. At that point, the race leader was Mike Eddy. He had shared the lead with John Benson Jr. They were the 2 drivers who had the lead in this race. There had been 5 cautions, most of them minor, for 35 laps. No serious accidents in this race, as there was not only in the spring of this year, but also last year. You remember, this racetrack claimed a lot of machinery.
And we now have yet a 3rd leader of this race, that being Harold Fair in car number 81. The Handiwac Chevrolet comes in 6th in points, was the season runner-up in both 1988 and 1990. He has 5 career ASA wins. The last one came in that 1990 racing season. Right behind him, a couple of hard-charging Fords, Gary St. Amant and Todd Forbes, and Forbes won 2nd spot.
Promised you a recap as we watch the tilt for the runner-up position of the cars on the lead lap. There are 9 of them. Things have changed a lot, so if you're keeping track at home, you might want to pull out a pencil and a piece of paper and take these guys down. Here are the 9. It is Fair, St. Amant, and the 07 car of Todd Forbes. Bet you figured those 3 out, 81, 7, and 07. Mike Eddy, yeah, he's still there. He's unofficially in 4th position right now. 5th is the Electric Man, Dennis Lampman. He is in car number 9 is in 5th position. 6th is Jay Sauter, despite that altercation under the yellow. 7th is Tony Raines in the borrowed engine, number 25. 8th is, get this, Joe Knott, the 21-year-old driver, and 9th is Tom Jones. Now, Joe Knott figured out something here, Rob. What you do is you go out at the beginning of the race and just drive.
Larry, you've got a pass for the lead.
In corner number 2, a car up on the wall. Bob Seneca was on top of the wall for about 2 seconds. You can see the tire marks on the wall. We'll get that to you in just a second. But Seneca almost out of this ballpark. That's the closest I've seen any ASA car to leaving the racetrack really in the past 3 seasons since we've been doing this contemporary series of races. Now, with the frame right on top of the wall, that's also a very dangerous moment, although I see the helmet coming off. So Bob is apparently all right. Back to the Joey Knott story after this incident right here, though. Let's see if we can find out exactly what happened with Bob and make sure that he is certainly okay.
Well, Bob has had several incidents on the racetrack, serious ones this season.
Look at that car. Look at it. It's on its way out for some reason. Now, that's the end of that incident.
Yeah, actually, the 2 right side wheels were up on the wall first, it appeared. Well, we're, again, just catching the tail end of it. We didn't see what precipitated that problem for Bob Seneca. He crashed here early in the race in April, so he's got to wonder what it's going to take to finish one at I-70 Speedway. Seneca also had a very serious pre-race crash at Topeka prior to the Mellow Yellow 300. It's been a very frustrating season for Bob Seneca. The only real bright spot, his early year win in the GM Teamwork 200 at Flint, Michigan.
He did have 3 third places, and those were in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th races of the year. So it looked like at the beginning of the year that Seneca, because the race he won was the 6th race, was going to have a typical Bob Seneca year. But listen to these finishes: 31st, 26th, 25th, 26th, 22nd, 24th, and he's going to be back in the 20s again this week. Not typical Seneca.
And as a result of all those DNFs and low finishes, he is 13th in the points after being as high as 3rd at the midpoint of the 1993 racing season.
It is very likely that we cannot see the depth of the damage. That car is likely very badly damaged. A tough break for the veteran Bob Seneca, the all-time leading winner in ASA.
Welcome back to I-70 Speedway, where we just witnessed one of the most spectacular incidents in ASA history. Bob, rim riding is supposed to be for sprint cars. How did you keep that car from going out of the park?
Oh, I guess I'm just a stunt driver, Ralph. It wasn't much fun, though. I don't know, something must have broke on the Lane Automotive Johnsonville Ford. Felt like a tire went down or a suspension part broke or something. It wouldn't turn when I got in the first turn. It just fell down and drove to the fence. I said, oh, no, here we go again.
When you're on the wall like that, is there anything you can do inside the cockpit? What goes through your mind?
Well, I just kind of hope we don't keep going over the other side and get upside down. I'm glad I came back down on the racetrack.
Bob Seneca is okay.
Now, we were commenting about how far Seneca must have gone. We've retraced his steps. There's the initial impact. That's a midpoint of corner 1 and 2. He's still on the wall there. Tires go up on the wall a second time. We're following around to where this ended. We still haven't found Seneca. It must have gone about 250 to 300 yards, and there you see the car stopped on the track. He went that far, and how he stayed in the ballpark, as the racers say, I don't know, because he had a lot of momentum and he was really up in the air.
And the car turned 90 degrees in the course of that slide. Initially, it was the right side tires on the wall, and then it scooted around to where the rear tires were over the wall before finally coming off the wall, entering the backstretch.
Well, one of the perils of running on a high-banked racetrack, we asked Jay Sauter earlier this weekend, how does one thrive on the high banks? They're so fast, and really they're so foreboding.
I like the speed, and I think these high bank fast racetracks take more concentration, more teamwork. It takes more of a whole team effort to go fast at a place like this, and we kind of thrive on that.
Well, Sauter is thriving on it again, even though he's had a couple of minor setes today. He is still in 6th position, and that's unofficial. Again, the yellow flags and pit stops continue to scramble the standings, but we'll repeat for you. Fair, St. Amant, Forbes, Eddy, Lampman. 5th position, we are now told. Sauter, Rains, Joe Knott, and Tom Jones are the drivers on the lead lap. Now, Rob, I was really astounded at the drivers who were among the fastest cars in this race that lost the lead lap. Run down some of those.
As we're about ready to go back to green, Randy McDonald is 10th, 1 lap down. Glenn Allen Jr. 11th. Rick Corelli 12th. 13th is Jay Summers, and 14th, 1 lap off the pace, Butch Miller.
Back to green at Odessa. The pot is stirred one more time. Now Todd Forbes making signs like he would like to lead this race. Oh, he makes a relatively dangerous pass. He goes out of the racing groove to go to the high side of Harold Fair. And Todd Forbes, who has had a chance a couple of times this year, as well as last year, at winning a race, takes over the lead. If he can lead past the start-finish line this time, he'll not only lead, he'll pick up 5 laps. Todd Forbes bringing Noah's Ark around. He flashes across the start-finish line, officially the race leader.
And that is Noah Yoder's Ark. Noah Yoder, the owner of the Ford dealership that owns and campaigns this race car. Meanwhile, Mike Eddy has also made the pass of Harold Fair for 2nd, and now Dennis Lampman trying to get it done on the high side in the orange and white car number 9.
Lampman is a lead lap car. Remember, a couple of races ago, he won for the first time in his ASA career. Tony Raines, he won for the first time in 1992, as did Jay Sauter, and they are top 10 cars on the lead lap again today.
Tony Raines continues to be a fantastic story, as they were loaded and ready to go home before they talked to Scott Hansen's team. Made the deal for the engine. It's working to perfection, and now Raines looks to the low side of Jay Sauter for that 4th position, or rather 5th spot.
Tony.
Oh, and he gets Jay out of shape in turn number 4. Sauter hangs on, but Raines continues the challenge for 5th.
Raines' best finish this year has been a pair of 5ths turned in at Nashville on a track almost exactly like this. And guess where else? Yeah, I-70, his best finishes of 1993.
Dennis Lampman continues to work on Harold Fair. That is 3rd and 4th positions.
Continuing out on track as we watch the face-off inside the top 5. This one is for 3rd position. We'll tell you some of the other cars that have remained on track. Dave Anspaugh is back out. As we have a piece of metal flying down the front straightaway. There's a piece of metal that was kicked up and is near the entrance to the first corner, but it's right up along the wall. I don't believe the ASA officials have spied that yet. It appears to be out of the way, but nonetheless, there is debris on this racetrack. Ralph?
I'm with Tommy Lucas, crew chief for Todd Forbes. Tommy, how's the car running? Is it handling properly?
We got a slight push in it right now. We'll probably have to bid one more time. With the Noah Yoder PowerTech Thunderbird, he's running pretty good.
Well, now he's got Mike Eddy running up behind him. How will you coach him to deal with Mike?
If Mike starts pushing us real bad, we'll probably let Mike go and kind of follow him to the safety right front tire.
All right, the strategy beginning to play out as we approach the 200th or 2/3 lap of this race, 2/3 mark of this race. 188 laps are complete. As I look back the field, by the way, I noticed that Gary St. Amant is slowing. I talked to you about the other cars on the track. We're going to pan back the entire field. Mike Eddy, we've shown you him many times today. He's right back up there in front as St. Amant is slowing and coming back to the pits. There's Lampman. He runs in 3rd. There's Raines and Harold Fair. That's 3rd, 4th, and 5th on the screen at this time.
And Raines is really closing on Dennis Lampman. Lampman won just a few weeks ago in the Michigan 300, his career first victory. Tony Raines, as you mentioned, has not won since early in 1992. And boy, would this be a Cinderella story if he could drive that ETR-ENL machine to a checkered flag. There's Harold Fair. He was leading the race on the restart.
Not only have those 5 cars remained on the lead lap, I must admit I attributed a bit to a roll of the dice. I thought it was fortune, but they have pulled away from the rest of the field. I think they are, I'm going to change my personal inner opinion, which I hadn't shared with all of you. They didn't belong up there. They belong, the 5 cars we've been talking about. Now, here's Glenn Allen Jr. He has lost 1 lap to the leaders. Unfortunately, he was caught in that fracas along pit road during one of the yellow flags. He's just never been able to make it up. He drove very hard earlier on, but he couldn't catch the leaders. Butch Miller didn't really lose his lap in that pit incident. He's down 1 lap, however. There's Benson. Gee, we've seen him earlier. He's several laps down and is trying to rack up points. They go to the high side of Brett Bell. Been a tough race for Brett. He was very competitive early on, very racy, been involved in a couple of incidents. Both of them appear to be not of his doing, and he has slowed down considerably.
There is Rick Corelli in car number 06. He too was caught up on pit road, lost a lap in the process, and is in 12th position, about a third of a straightaway back of Glenn Allen Jr. and Butch Miller. As we said, we have not seen Rick in some time in an ASA event, though he does hope to compete for Rookie of the Year in 1994.
I'll tell you what, Rob, before that incident, I honestly thought Corelli was one of the horses that could take this race. Now, there's Randy McDonald, officially 13th place, the headless horseman with no hood at this point. And there's Joey Knott, the man who goes out there and peels the fenders off in the first 25 laps, stays in the lead lap, and look at here, 6th place.
Joe continues to impress. He's just 1 spot out of equaling his career best finish, which came on the road course a couple of weeks ago. Right behind him is Jay Summers in car number 70. We've documented his climb to the top of the heap. He lost a lap on pit road and now runs in 14th position. Slips out of the groove, and Tom Jones, hoodless, is still on the lead lap in car number 0 and in 8th position, having good back-to-back weekends. Finished 3rd just a week ago in the Anderson 400.
Tom Jones is 14th overall points, and we've got a problem on the racetrack, a spin. That's Mike Miller in the inside of corner number 2. Right back on the gas, drops her down in the 1st gear, now 2nd gear. Says, I know those leaders are coming around, although Mike is not a lead lap car.
Well, I was going to mention, Larry, while we were traipsing our way back through the pack, Todd Forbes had disappeared. He had built a full straightaway lead over Mike Eddy. That is the man of the moment. Todd Forbes in car number 07 finished a runner-up to Bob Seneca nearly into the season last year at the Toledo 400.
Couple things. Now, here's the incident involving Miller. Looks like he may have had help. Don't know. We didn't see the beginning of that, but Miller comes around. Let me tell you something else that happened. Mike drove very hard under the yellow to come back and beat Mike Eddy to the line. I'll bet he thinks he saved that lap. He probably didn't know that Todd Forbes was in the sunset. He was heading to California.
And Mike Miller driving that machine that last year was at the hands of Gary St. Amant, where he drove it to the Canadian National Championship. ASA had 5 races in Canada last year, that series within a series, which was won by Gary St. Amant. 3 of the 5 races in that car number 18.
Looking at Harold Fair's Chevrolet, there were 18 Luminas that began this race, 11 Ford Thunderbirds, and as usual, they have certainly made their presence felt. 3 Pontiacs and 4 Oldsmobiles comprised the starting field of today's race. Incidentally, there were 2 drivers who were supposed to be in the race. They had problems overnight, did not start. Make mention of them. Hendersonville, Tennessee's Tom Harrington in the BFI Customer Service Oldsmobile, and Dwayne Behrens was scheduled to make his ASA debut today. He's a Northfield, Minnesota driver from the Twin Cities area in the M&M Deliveries Pontiac. With 200 laps on the old noggin down, we take a break. Take some size relief. If you get a refreshment, we'll be back. Among the season points leaders, only Mike Eddy is having a day to write home about. We have had 4 race leaders: John Benson, talk about points leaders, Mike Eddy, Harold Fair, and Todd Forbes. John Benson Jr. led 130 laps, and a man who was on the lead lap until moments ago, Jay Sauter, it's quit again, Rob.
Disappointment continues to plague this Chris Weiss-owned racing team. They have not won an event. There is Jay climbing out of the race car. We saw him in that same position in the month of April here, but it was only 13 laps from the finish, and it happened as he was leading the race. And Ralph is down pit side with a real surprised car owner this afternoon. Ralph?
Ernie Roselli's a car owner for Tony Raines. Now, you guys were trying to decide whether to come in or stay out, and you stayed out. Why?
I don't really know. We have a shot going down. Our spring collapsed. Something's making a right front drag on the car. We were trying to decide whether it was worth coming in and trying to fix it or just hang on.
They're deciding to stay out and hang on. They're also concerned, of course, about that motor, which is a new power plant that they put in the car early on in the day. Ernie told me that they thought that engine was going to be a little soft, strong enough to get to the finish, but a little soft on horsepower.
Well, the green bunting waves for the 9th time today. That is the original start plus 8 yellow flags. They have pretty much averaged about 8 laps apiece, those yellow flags have. And the most serious incident involving Bob Seneker, no injury to Bob, but boy, he banged up his race car one more time.
And Todd Forbes using a very high, very aggressive line out of turn number 4. That's a bit of a treacherous place to be on this racetrack. And for a guy with a collapsed right front shock, and as they put it, a soft motor, Tony Raines is turning in a performance of a season here in car number 25. Challenging Dennis Lampman for the 3rd position, dropping to the low side. Looks like it's only a matter of time until he'll set sail for those 2 black cars in front of him.
Raines has had a trampoline season. It's been up, it's been down. It's been up, it's been down. He's had a 2nd and a 6th in the last 4 races, and he's also had a 16th and a 20th and 1 DNF in those 4 races. So for Tony Raines, it's on again, off again. This should be, by the numbers, an on-again race.
Well, it certainly should. And Tony is, remember, 5th in the point standings, wanted to solidify that position, and now appears to be building himself a cushion. Ralph is in the pits with a very dejected driver. Ralph?
Jay, what was the cause of your frustration today?
Well, it started out we got tangled up with somebody getting into the pits, and it knocked the right front out of line. It bent an A-frame or something. And then it appears we dropped the cylinder. So this Delco Voyager Miller High Life KC Motorsports team just having a little rough luck. The guys don't give up, and I don't give up. We'll be back next week.
Jay Sauter. Boy, if there was a Perseverance Award that would be presented in ASA, certainly among the 5 fastest consistently teams would go to that young man.
We're watching, or have been watching, the battle for 3rd position as it continues to boil. The reason we're watching this is because Todd Forbes is already about 4 laps into the green flag session here. Built, there it is, a significant cushion over Mike Eddy in car number 88. And you have to believe, Larry, if Eddy had the horses to keep up with Forbes, he would be doing it. He's not saving anything as we've now entered the twilight zone, the last 100 laps of this Missouri 300.
Raines in the powder blue and white number 25, the Ernie Roselli car out of Pittsburgh, and Dennis Lampman, the guy who pulled off a surprise a couple of races ago. And I'll tell you, if you're talking about big race drivers to get around, the Gentle Giant is certainly the biggest one to get around. You know, I got to admit, if you'd seen Dennis in the pit area before or after races, you wouldn't think that he was the race driver, but he is legitimate. I'll tell you, Dennis Lampman has opened up a lot of eyes in the last couple of seasons, and particularly this year. That guy gets around a racetrack.
He certainly does. You may recollect, if you watched us on this racetrack last year, Lampman took a ride very similar to the one that we saw Bob Seneker endure just a few laps ago, as Lampman had hit the wall very hard at the exact same location. Now Raines will try the high side of Lampman, and car number 15, Glenn Allen Jr., 1 lap down, is closing on this duo. He'd like a shot, Larry, at getting back on that lead lap.
He really would, and it's very unfortunate that Glenn was not involved in an on-track incident which cost him his lap. Had he not been involved in that, he would have just moved into a very competitive 4th position.
And Butch Miller,
Gary St. Amant,
and Gary St. Amant right behind Miller hits the wall.
And
right
his
behind
teammates,
him
and Eddy is involved. There's oil on the racetrack. Todd Forbes spins. Mike Eddy is up against the wall. We have 4 cars involved in an incident in corner number 4. It has to be moisture on the racetrack. I cannot believe that all 4 of them would have made a miscue. It began with somebody spinning in front of Gary St. Amant.
Butch Miller spun, and Butch is driving away, so he obviously got into someone else's liquid on the racetrack.
And then St. Amant went into the wall very hard. His teammate was right behind him, Russ Gamester. And then the race leaders, Mike Eddy and Todd Forbes, came around, and both of them spun. And look at Eddy. Eddy has got serious damage to the race car.
He says he's...
Mike Eddy appeared to be headed for yet another victory, or at least a top 2 or 3 finish, and Eddy makes the hard left-hand turn into the pit area.
Larry, he already's radioed into the crew to say that he is done. Here he comes rolling in behind the pit wall, and we are here to take a look at the GM Goodwrench Pontiac. He is already unstrapping himself from the car. As you can see, it is sitting down on the ground. The left front wheel bent, broken, busted. Everything you could possibly do to the front suspension of this car has been done. They're going to try and raise it up off the ground so they can get the jack underneath, and as soon as Mike gets out of the car, we'll get a word with him.
Well, here are Mike Eddy's last 6 finishes: 18th, 1st, 26th, 12th, 8th, and 16th, and then no indication yet where he might finish here this afternoon. What a disappointment for Mike Eddy as he looked to be back in the championship chase, and now it's gone up in a plume of smoke. That is tire smoke from his car number 88 as it skittered into the wall.
Mike Eddy, 8-8. We told you the Chinese consider that to be good luck. By the way, the number of letters in Mike Eddy's name, 8, number 8-8. And there is Saint Amant, I believe, up against the fence. Smoke coming out of obviously a damaged radiator. There's Gary looking to the back now. Here's the best replay we can get of it because it didn't happen right with the leaders. And there you see debris being struck by Butch Miller and puts him out of shape. So possibly it was the same debris that collected the other 4 cars. You can see Miller has a flat left front tire, or perhaps a problem into the brake drum area. But Forbes is back out. There's a close-up shot looking through the fence on the outside of Gary Saint Amant. You can see that car still smoking. And as we look at this shot, Ralph is standing by with Mike Eddy.
Well, he's already cooled himself down a little bit, gotten something to drink. Mike, can you explain to us what happened out there from your viewpoint?
Well, when I got there was oil all over the track, and I just kind of turned around and hit whoever was in front of me. I don't even really know who I hit.
Was the track getting any slipperier than before, or is this just the heat bringing everything to the surface?
No, the track is actually in pretty good shape. Just an unfortunate situation, you know. Somebody blows up, just makes a mess.
With 221 laps down, do we have an interesting, intriguing batch of cars that are on the lead lap? What are we down to? 5? Fair's got to still be there, although he stopped under that yellow flag. I assume he preserved his lead lap status. Now there are 6, we are told. Joe Knott, Dennis Lampman, Harold Fair, and Tony Raines.
Here's another look at the incident up in turn number 4. Gary Saint Amant has already hit the wall. Mike Eddy slides in.
Into Forbes. That was the race leader that Mike hit. He probably had his eyes on Gary Saint Amant until he spun. Then Mike was actually looking backwards because that's the direction his car was going by the time he rammed into Todd Forbes. But Mike obviously with his hands tied. But again, back to that group of cars that is on the lead lap. It's a very intriguing group. Glenn Allen Jr. only 1 lap down. If he had not lost that time in the pits, here would be a man who was really on tap to maybe head for victory at Odessa today.
The hood has been up on Dennis Lampman's car number 9. He was having a great run here this afternoon and operating in the 3rd position right in front of Tony Raines just before this most recent caution. Fortunately, both he and Tony were back far enough to get slowed down before they got into the debris.
Well, this one now is completely up for grabs. Eddy is out of it. Is Forbes wounded? How strong can Glenn Allen be? And what about Dennis Lampman? Is he still in it? Don't know. The cleanup continues at I-70. You know, the Missouri Compromise, going back in American history, back in 1820, allowed slavery, and it set off a lot of bloodshed out in this part of the country as rivaling bands in this state from county to county fought to determine whether or not slavery was going to be allowed out here. But this day has been very bloodletting on the race cars. It's been a tough, tough day. Ralph?
You know, Larry, after the race at Anderson last week, we had a lot of torn up race cars, and we were a little afraid that some of the teams would show up here with some beaten and battered, patchwork put together machines. But a real tribute to the ASA crews. They went back to their shops, and instead they brought us a bunch of machinery that was pretty and pristine. But once again this week, they're going to have to do it again. We've got a lot of torn up race cars here at I-70 as more of them come in on the wreckers. These ASA crews are going to have to go back to the shop, go to work, and get ready for Minneapolis next week.
Boy, visually, a very appropriate scene as Ralph ends his report. The wrecker with the flashing yellow lights goes by as we look at the Winds Spirit Thunderbird of Gary Saint Amant who crashed very hard into the outside wall. They put a lot of effort into that car, in particular the last couple of weeks, and they have been fast. They have definitely had a car that was capable of winning a race at Anderson last week and here this week
the Carnage.
in Odessa. Yes.
Mike Eddy. Also behind the wall is the number 9 machine of Dennis Lampman. His afternoon is concluded. It's just a parking lot back there. And again, these drivers and crews, I say drivers because many of them do their own wrenching, have just a week, Larry, to prepare for next week's event.
You know, 1993 is also something else I've been having some fun with this year because I've done a lot of races out here in several divisions. The 150th anniversary of the Oregon Trail, as well as the Santa Fe Trail going to the west. This trail has also been tough this year. I'll tell you, this ASA trail, not quite as demanding as the old Oregon Trail. Can you imagine going 2,000 miles in a covered wagon with no bridges and no air conditioning?
But the fixes were a little cheaper.
Yeah, they were. How about it, Ralph? A lot of fixing and a lot of expense going to be spent this week, eh?
Fixing, yes. Expense, no. Here's one reason why all these race cars are going to look so good next week in Minnesota. All these banded body panels on the AC-Delco Challenge Series cars are plastic, easy to replace. They just snap on, snap off, just like those little snap-on models you used to build as a kid, Mr. Newber. And the cost to replace a body panel on one of these ASA cars, to the whole car for about $2,500.
Did they have those when you were a kid?
I've always been too sophisticated. I read.
Hey, Ralph, I build them. I'll admit it.
There is Gary St. Amant taking a sip of refreshment. Gary's had a tough season inside the cockpit. They've had a couple of crashes that brought carbon monoxide fumes into the car. He's had to step out of the race car a couple times because of crashes. And again, he was one of the drivers who was very concerned about the weather conditions today. It's very hot, it's very humid, very heavy air out there, and just to sit in the stands really takes some stamina and perseverance. Racing Electronics is the official supplier of communications equipment to the American Speed Association. A lot of fans use them nowadays, and they're giving you an opportunity to feel like you're a part of the team. There's a team member wearing his scanner. Rob and I will be drawing the name of one lucky race fan during each of the remaining ASA races televised on TNN, and the winner will receive a Uniden Bearcat scanner from Racing Electronics. There's the address, box GFS 8701 Mallard Creek Road, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28262. That's where you send your entry into that contest. Box GFS 8701 Mallard Creek Road, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28262. And by the way, today's winner is, drum roll please, from Quincy, Illinois, narrows it down a bit, Ronald Grant. Congratulations, Ronald. Your Racing Electronics scanner is on the way. And on the way to all of you watching at home is Mr. Ralph Shaheen.
And joining me will be Gary St. Amant. Gary, that looked like a pretty hard hit. How was it inside the car?
Well, Ralph, I took a shot. That might be the best shot I've ever taken, you know. But, you know, it's a shame, you know, the Wins Thunderbird was running really well. You know, it's kind of getting disheartening here, you know. The car's been fast here about the last 3 or 4 races, and we just keep on having bad luck, you know, and cut down tires cost us last 2 races, and yeah, we'll just keep on plugging away, you know. Hopefully one of these days we'll get us a good run in, and hopefully put the Wins Thunderbird up front.
You seem to be really driving with a vengeance these days. How is it going inside the mind?
Well, you know, we're real hungry for a win, you know. Yeah, people with wins have been really good to us and to Mac McClellan, and you know, we just feel like, you know, they're due for a win. You know, we need to get them a win, and we're going to get them one.
There is the damaged remains of that Wind Spirit Thunderbird, St. Amant's best finish this year. Mentioned it earlier in the broadcast. In case those of you who have joined us late missed it, was a 2nd place, race number 2 of the year, and since that time, the closest he's been able to get to the front at the end of the race was a 6th at Salem, but he has led a lot of the last, 2 of the last 3 races.
We're looking at 1st and 2nd position, Todd Forbes and Tony Raines. Larry, I think you'd have to say both of those cars are suspect. The biggest question I would have with regard to Forbes, earlier, remember when Ralph interviewed his crew chief, the crew chief said, we need one more stop. Forbes has not come in since that point. Does, in fact, he still need another stop as we prepare to go back to green. And for Tony Raines in car number 25, a soft engine and a collapsed right front shock, but he stays on the racetrack. I don't know if he's got anything for Forbes or not, though.
And who does that leave in 3rd place? But young Joey. I know he doesn't like me calling him young, but hey, he's 21. Joe Knott is in 3rd place. Could Joe Knott sneak in a surprise victory here? Now, Harold Fair is also on the lead lap, as is Tom Jones. And Glenn Allen Jr., third on the track, is 1 lap down. Now we're getting an update on the Knott situation. He lost a lap somewhere. Well, what about Allen now? I mean, Glenn Allen Jr. has had a strong car. To get that lap back soon, we still have 70 laps to go, but Todd Forbes, he looks bulletproof right now.
Larry, Todd Forbes' crew just told me they can go all the way. The question is, how is the car going to be handling when they get near the finish? They got enough fuel, but how are those tires going to be?
15, Glenn Allen Jr. We mentioned that he is 1 lap down, officially being shown in 4th place. So that means that 4 cars, it works out that way, are on the lead lap. Also, cars 1 lap down. Remember how strong Rick Corelli and Jay Sommers were earlier in the race. We unofficially can confirm for you. Can you say that? Unofficially confirmed? At any rate, 1 lap down, so they would be in 6th and 7th positions.
Great battle back in the pack. Only a couple of these cars remain on the lead lap. The littlest car number 0 of Tom Jones, you saw him. And there's car number 81, Harold Fair. He is in 3rd position. Glenn Allen, meanwhile, has lost 5th spot to car number 70, Jay Summers. He's back, and he is on the roll in car number 70, trying to get a lap back from Tony Raines, but a long way to go to catch the leader, Todd Forbes.
Black, yellow numeral number 81, Harold Fair, lead lap car. There is Randy McDonald. He is at least a couple of laps down. We'll check on that. That's Mike Miller. He too, then 18, and 19 are on the track together. Not fighting for position. To the best of our knowledge, I think that McDonald has lost a few more laps than what Mike Miller has. Mike was involved in a couple of spins this afternoon at Odessa.
Jeff Neal, meanwhile, has come back on the racetrack in the split-fire Thunderbird, car number 5, trying to score some much-needed points. And Ralph, why are we now suddenly showing Joe Knott down a lap?
Rob, remember how we had all those cars congested at the end of pit lane with the stop-and-go board? Apparently, Joe Knott got caught up in one of those situations when the stop board came out and the cars came by and put him down a lap. Now his crew is saying they're not so sure that he should be down a lap, or that some of the other cars that are on the racetrack at this time should not also be down a lap. So there's going to be a little paperwork discussing going on after this race.
Todd Forbes continues to orbit the half-mile plus of the I-70 Speedway. Interesting races being turned in as we continue to watch. Oh, and Joey Knott is bumped from behind by the 06 car of Rick Corelli, the High Plains drifter, drifted into Joey Knott. Joey gathered the handle back up, though, and kept the car going straight. I was about ready to comment. The race of interest for me is that of Jay Sommers and Glenn Allen Jr. Sommers and Allen have gotten around Tony Raines, so only Todd Forbes among the lead lap cars are ahead of Jay and Glenn at this point. And if something were to happen to the 07 car of Todd Forbes, or should Forbes make the one more pit stop we sort of think he has to make, what kind of position will that put Sommers and Glenn Allen Jr. in?
And interesting, Larry, this is the team, the Jay Sommers car, for which Glenn Allen Jr. drove 1 year ago.
There is Glenn Allen. The car seems to be handling quite well. I've been watching him, Rob, and everybody else, when you get to this point of the race, can't bring it right down at the bottom of the racetrack. They always drift up about a half a lane or maybe a full lane. If Glenn is down on anything today, it appears to be horsepower. That's just a sort of a verbal observation, though, with no confirmation on that. But that car seems to be willing to stay right down on the bottom of the solid white line. A very good sign, normally, for this time of the race, more than 2/3 in.
You know, listening to the engine, and I noticed the same thing yesterday. I think not so much being down on horsepower as perhaps, and again, this is just speculation. That's why I'm up here and not down there turning the wrenches. I think they might have guessed a little wrong on gear selection for this weekend. And that might have been a conservative move on their part, choosing to err on the conservative side, hoping they could run it to completion, knowing that this racetrack is very tough on equipment.
Well, again, watch this picture. Look where Allen is, right down in the bottom. Summers faster down the straightaways. Now he'll gain some ground, and Glenn will drive into the corners deeper because the car just sticks down there. Look at Glenn. That's the highest he has been off the bottom of the racetrack for the last 5 laps. Reason why he did it that time, because he had an opportunity to get underneath Jay, and he drove it in harder than what he normally would.
We know that team has struggled finding sponsorship as we look for the 07 again of Todd Forbes with about a straightaway advantage. And Johnny Benson apparently is going to call it quits in car number 21, leaving only second Scott Hansen in the points on the racetrack. Scott had been shown in 11, 2 laps down.
What a remarkable chain of events. I mean, the points this year have just turned into an absolute puzzle. What's going to happen with the points? It's like no one can stand the success of being the points leader. Hansen, Benson, and Eddy have all faltered after they got near the top. Now, here are the cars in the lead lap. We're down to 4. Forbes, Raines, Fair, and Jones. And guess how many victories this year among those 4 drivers? 0. We could have a brand new race winner. Now, winners this year among the regulars, John Benson has won 3 times. There's Todd Forbes, the black 07, continuing to lead the race in the Yoder Ford machine. Scott Hansen, he has won 3 times. Mike Eddy has won twice. Dennis Lampman won. Glenn Allen Jr. a single victory. And Bob Seneker could have a brand new race winner. We will get you a little closer to the finish as we come back from this pause. Joey Knott's car, the tire has got some flames coming out from underneath it. I believe that was from the engine blowing. He lost an engine going down the backstretch, and hot oil, I'm sure, coated the underneath of that car.
Well, Joey Knott, tell me a little bit about this drive here this afternoon. It looks like you're getting a lot more comfortable with the car. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm really getting comfortable. We had a great race going today. Allen Knott Motorsports Ray before Thunderbird really was running strong. Can't say enough for our motor builder, Ray Baker. Has really done a great job. This is the first motor we've lost, and just had a great day today. Just happened to lose one.
All right, so how do we get to the next step and you to victory circle?
Well, just keep maintaining our position on the track and hope it comes to us.
Here's a rundown now, as best as we can put it together for you from our crack scoring crew here in the broadcast booth. 4 cars in the lead lap, as we documented for you a little earlier. Forbes the leader, Tony Raines, borrowed engine, runs second. Harold Fair is third, and the zero hero Tom Jones is in 4th. Now, the 5th running car on the screen right now is the red and white number 15 of Glenn Allen Jr. He is the fastest car on the racetrack. Glenn Allen Jr. is 1 lap behind. He's in 5th place. If he can get around Todd Forbes, and we have a yellow flag, this young man has a shot at victory here this afternoon. Again, 1 lap down, but he's been closing at the rate of 0.3 of a second a lap. Glenn goes to the high side of Todd. He's been passing everybody low. Let's see if it handles just as well on the high side as it does on the low side. He knows that's the race leader. Look at Glenn Allen Jr. He blows away the race leader, Todd Forbes. Allen is now back on the lead lap. Had it not been for a pit road incident, he is now the race leader. We have 264 laps in the book, 36 to go. Not enough time for Glenn to go all the way around the track and win this race. He now begins to pray for a yellow. In 6th position, 1 lap down, is Jay Sommers. 7th, also 1 lap down, Randy McDonald. 8th is Rick Corelli in car number 06. 9th, 2 laps down, is Steve Holtzhausen. And in 10th is the number 53 car of the heretofore Red Hot, Scott Hansen.
I'll tell you what I think is going on right now. Glenn Allen quickly caught and got around Todd Forbes, but I think Todd has been in... Okay, you noticed that. Let me make my point here. Forbes is now staying right with him. Yeah. I think Todd probably has had communication with his crew chief, said, hey, the 15 is catching you. Let him go by and then just follow him around the racetrack. He'll never come back around and catch you. But if you can stay with that car, you're going to win your first career ASA event.
Ah, good point. We have not mentioned that. First career ASA win. Todd Forbes, who has been a regular off and on for the past 4 seasons. Best career finish is a 2nd place, which he turned in 1992. Remember that fabulous 1992 when several drivers, almost 15, had their best career finishes, among which were Benson with his victory, Raines, Sauter, Forbes, Jones, Stauffer, Harrington, Vogel, and Pat Prideaux. All those drivers had their career best last year. Now, Todd Forbes is the man in the hot seat, Ralph. Can he take it home?
I don't know, Newber. That Albright kid's getting pretty good at this guessing game. I just talked to the crew chief, Tommy Lucas, for Todd Forbes, and he said, wave him on by.
Hey, you get lucky once in a while, don't you? You say I'd rather be lucky than good. I kind of like to be both. Maybe one of these days I will be.
Well, we're rapidly reaching the point where if Glenn Allen Jr. does not get a yellow in the next 5 laps, he will not have an opportunity to catch Forbes, because there are so many lapped cars on the track right now between him and Forbes. If he were to get a yellow, he'd have to go all the way around. He has about 18 cars. Well, bring that down to about 15 cars. He would have to pass. So despite the fact that he's running quick, maybe as quick as Todd Forbes, maybe just a smidgen quicker, still has too many lap cars to get around unless he gets a yellow now in about 3 laps.
Todd Forbes now closes in to put yet another lap on Scott Hansen. Hansen's best bet at this point, just tool around. There's the second place car number 25 of Tony Raines. You saw the gap, the deficit that Raines now must surmount. It's about a full straightaway.
Harold Fair in trouble in the backstretch. Smoke, not a spin. Fair continues to motor around. Heavy smoke now in corner number 4 from Fair. There he is. Apparently not leaking any fluid on the racetrack, because Glenn Allen Jr. mirrored, speaking about reflections, the same lane that Fair had, and he did not seem to slip at all. But Fair is killing the mosquitoes and also killing his chances, I think, to finish on the lead lap and to finish up in the first 3 here today.
Well, we'll see. Harold staying up in the racing groove may necessitate a caution flag. Closing quickly on him is car number 15, Glenn Allen Jr., and that will be a pass for the 4th position on the racetrack. Harold staying out, that surprises me. There's car number 07, Todd Forbes, anticipating maybe yet another caution. And look, well, he stays right behind or right in front of Todd Forbes, does Glenn Allen.
Glenn slowed down a lot, and I think it's because he assumed that underneath all that smoke had to be oil or water, and it really allowed Forbes to catch up. Todd had slipped behind Glenn by, a couple hundred yards in lap traffic, and Glenn is back on the gas again. You saw him jockeying that car out of corner number 4. The black flag comes out for Harold Fair, so Fair was, I'm sure, trying to nurse that car home. He wanted to finish in the first 5, but he's been requested to step behind the pit wall, at least temporarily, to assess what is the problem. No black, he didn't heat it this time. Black flag comes out a second time for Harold Fair. Under normal circumstances, the instructions are, we'll warn you twice. We have to tell you a 3rd time we stop scoring. So if Harold doesn't stop this time, it could be quite devastating. He does pull to the inside down the backstretch.
Harold Fair started the season with a 36th place finish here at I-70, one of the first cars out of the race. He's battled back to 6th. He's been there in the points ever since early June. Probably will maintain that position right behind Tony Raines, despite his out here this afternoon with less than 22 laps to go. And we're very rapidly reaching those stages where, if you're Todd Forbes, you hear every creak and groan in the 07.
Let's talk a little bit about Todd Forbes as we check out this distance between 1st, 2nd, 3rd. The second running car will be the Tony Raines car, something borrowed, something blue, and something new. It's a wedding for Tony Roselli and
Tony Raines.
Tony Raines and Ernie Roselli, yes. Got carried away with my cliche there, and we're looking for Raines. There he is, and something borrowed, something blue, and something new, something old, something new. He's got all those elements, and he's having a good race. Wanted to talk also a little bit as we see Harold Fair try to go back out. Apparently, ASA officials decided that he wasn't leaking anything. They burning up something. Talk a little bit about Todd Forbes. Here's a driver who, about 12 years ago, was one of the most outstanding midget drivers in the Midwest. He was running with the Rich Vogelers and the Ken Schraders of the world at that time. He's from Bryan, Ohio, the northwest corner of the state, right along the Ohio State Turnpike, just east of the Indiana line. He was seriously injured in a midget crash. There's the second running Tony Raines and the third running Tom Jones. But back to that Forbes story, he was seriously injured in a midget crash, and a lot of people wondered whether or not he was ever going to completely recover. Well, he has completely recovered after the injuries. He went to racing cars with fenders, and he's gotten just a little better every year.
He's gotten a lot better, Larry. I remember his first ASA appearance as Harold Fair. Apparently now finally is going to give it up for the afternoon as he pulls into the garage area. Todd Forbes' first appearance in an ASA event was on the high-banked half-mile at Salem. Was so lost on the racetrack that they put another driver in it for that afternoon, but Todd persevered, and he's now completely made the transition from open-wheel racer to championship stock car caliber stock car driver. We would like to mention one thing very quickly. The Roberts family, who promote this racetrack, have an event coming up. If you're in the Midwest and can make it here the weekend of October 22nd through the 24th, the World Cup 300 right here at I-70 Speedway. So if you don't have anything to do that weekend, come on out and support the racetrack and the Roberts family.
287 laps are now complete. Todd Forbes appears to be ahead, and we've got a spin on the backstretch. Yellow flag is oh, Jeff Neal takes evasive action and crashes hard into one of the heavy tractor tires that block a creek that runs along the backstretch and also the telephone pole. Jeff had a very serious crash. He was trying to avoid the spinning Brett Bell, and he went into one of those tires with the driver's side. Here he is jumping out of the car, though, so Jeff is okay, but tough crash down there. So the yellow flag comes out now with 288 laps down. Glenn Allen Jr. gets to go all the way around the racetrack. To quote another of my broadcasting colleagues, I've always been fascinated by this term. I don't know where it came from, Larry Rice. Does he have the beans now to get back up there and battle with Todd Forbes?
I don't know, but he's going to make a pit stop. He has dropped to the bottom of the racetrack. Really has nothing to lose, Larry. Might as well come in and put fresh right side tires on that race car and give it a bonsai charge. You never know. He might finish third, could even come to second position.
288.
As 288, we may remain under yellow for some laps, but we will stop the count. If we reach lap 295, the last 5 must be run under green in any ASA event.
Watch this crash with Jeff Neal. This was the most serious crash of the day. Brett Bell spins. Neal will come from the right-hand side of your screen, take evasive action. He bumps Brett. That sends him out of control. He slides in the infield, hits that big tractor tire, rips the right side off of the car, and then backs into the Armco steel on the inside.
And that's the worst hit of all, that one at the very end. When you back into something, it makes every part of your body go in directions that it's not intended to go, and that's probably the angle at which cars are least likely to crash. Ralph, what's your assessment from pit side?
Rob, take a look at this race car. All the body panels that we told you about, they snapped right off. Pieces of suspension work down there broke off. But here's the key. This is the center section of the car. All of this caging, there is not a bend or a break anywhere in here, and that's where Jeff Neal was sitting. That's why he was able to get out and walk back to his pit stall.
We have just been given the signal, 1 lap to go for green, 290 laps down. Let me paint a picture for you here. Glenn Allen Jr. was ranked 12th in points coming in. They're not really going after points. They're going after race victories. Had 1 pole this year, or last year, and 1 win this year. Watch for Glenn Allen Jr. to just stand on the throttle, go to the high side, try and gain as much ground as he possibly can in 10 laps, but he just doesn't have enough time, but boy, he's going to give it a try, I guarantee you. With a clear racetrack can pretty much determine the pace that he wants to run at. 292 will be in the books after this pass of the flag stand, and he is opening up a little bit of distance between himself and Raines, although you got to believe that Raines may still have a shot at this.
I don't know. We wanted to create some drama during that caution as Raines closed up, but Todd Forbes has been so strong over the last 100 laps, and knowing that Tony Raines is really nursing a car that may be down on power, may have a suspension problem, and again, it's been an amazing day, a tremendous weekend for Ernie Roselli and that Tony Raines team.
Glenn Allen Jr. has begun to leap the tall buildings with single and double and triple bounds. There is Glenn going to the high side of Mike Miller, trying to get Rick Corelli out of the way. He taps him just a little bit, says, man, I'm coming through. I got the hot race car right now. 294 laps down. There goes Allen quickly to the high side of Corelli. Allen is closing in on Tom Jones. Maybe the best that he can hope for is a third. 294 sands to the 300 sand hourglass. Allen goes to the high side of Jay Sommers. Sort of thought that Sommers was in a position to do well in this race, but Glenn Allen Jr. is really going.
Now on the same straightaway with the leader Todd Forbes, the only possible savior for Glenn Allen would be yet another caution, which would stop the lap count. Even so, I don't think he could get by both Jones and Raines and mount a charge on Forbes before it's over.
I can see Dave Taylor right now down at the start-finish line lobbying with ASA officials for a 350-lap race. Todd Forbes looking looking to pick up the checkered flag first for the very initial time in his ASA career. Glenn Allen Jr., meanwhile, has caught Tom Jones, and they will be having a little discussion for third place. Allen goes to the high side of Jones. Easy pickings out there. It's like picking the corns in a Iowa cornfield. As he goes to the high side, he picks up a position, but no way he can come close with 2 laps to go. Now 1 lap to go. The white flag coming up for Todd Forbes. What an emotional moment this will be for this driver from Ohio and his car owner, Noah Yoder. They have sacrificed so much to be an ASA racer. They have been close before, but have never picked up the checker flag. Looking for his first career victory. Ohio's Todd Forbes wins it. Tony Raines comes in second, and a fast-rising Glenn Allen Jr. He's on the podium again, but he has to settle for third.
We said this is the first career ASA victory for Todd Forbes. Well, he won a 50-lap qualifying race in the Buckeye 300, the second race of this season, and there were 2 great performers as well. Tom Jones finishing 4th behind Glenn Allen.
This will be interesting because Todd really isn't the most expressive person. Will he be excited in victory lane, or will he be typically Todd Forbes laid back? We'll let you know when we return. In 4 of the last 5 races, Todd Forbes has had a top 10 finish. Today, he's the victor. He's not only top 10, he's number 1.
Boy, that's a long road back to victory lane for you, Todd. What was it that made the difference out there today, do you think?
Well, we were lucky this time, I guess. We had a flat left rear at first and then a flat right rear, and at the end it was running. Normally we've been running in the middle of the race and not good at the end, so this time we just lucked out with a good car at the end of the race.
You know, you've worked real hard at keeping your spirits up all the way through these seasons that you've been running with us. You got so close, and then something would go wrong. Tell me a little bit about the relief and the jubilation that this comes, and what you think this means for this team from here now.
Well, I don't totally think it's sunk in for me yet, really, but, I mean, it's great, and hopefully we can keep going bigger and better on down the line.
You know, Larry, as you said, he is not the most talkative person in victory lane, but look at that smile. That's Todd Forbes right there, and that's the biggest smile we've seen out of him in a long time.
Ralph, I've known Todd for a long time, and he's a very excellent man, and he's a gentleman, and his lack of expression is not anything to do with his dedication. He and Noah are very deserving winners of a race. The next ASA race live on TNN is the Madison 200 from Oregon, Wisconsin. That's right in the center of that state. That's on the 12th of September at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We'll be back with more. About 7 o'clock last night, this team was loading up, getting ready to go home. Well, they finished second in the race. How did that happen, Ralph Shaheen?
You know, Larry, I was just wondering if I should interview these guys who did such a good job or this guy who did such a good job. Let's go with you, Tony Raines. You do most of the talking for this team, but you couldn't have done it without these guys next to you.
No, that's really true. These guys worked really hard in the evening, and I'd also like to thank Jerry Gunderman and Scott Hansen, because without those guys giving us an engine, we wouldn't have been able to compete. You know, we were really down. We were behind. The last 3 races, we had some tough luck, and they let us use the engine, and you know, I can't thank them enough, and I can't thank the crew enough, and you know, we're really happy to be here in second.
And this really puts you back into the heart of the thick of the points chase. How do you feel about that now? What do you do as you go to Minnesota?
Well, you know, we're 5th in the points before this race, and we didn't want to give that up. You know, I mean, we really looked like we were going to be sliding down without being able to start the race. So, you know, this really makes us feel good. Hopefully it'll give us some momentum going into Minnesota, and we can do good.
So Tony Raines, a drained Tony Raines, comes home second place after just a marvelous performance by that crew overnight.
And we can give you a quick rundown of the unofficial top 10. Todd Forbes, Tony Raines, Glenn Allen, of course, first, second, and third. Tom Jones hung on for 4th. Rick Corelli, 1 lap down, 5th position. Jay Summers, 6th, also a lap off the pace. 7th, 2 laps down with Steve Holtzhausen. Scott Hansen finishes 8th and may catch Benson in the points. In 9th position, car number 19, Randy McDonald, and 10th, Mike Miller in car number 18.
And for Jeff Neal, just to reconfirm for you that he was okay in that very spectacular crash at the very end of the race. Remember last race, Jeff made an estimated 12 pit stops and still came home in the 9th position. Now, you've been watching live American Speed Association racing on the AC-Delco Challenge Series network from the I-70 Speedway. This is the Great American Racing Series, and it continues. Today from the I-70 Speedway, today's final act has now been played out, and an understudy has taken center stage. Todd Forbes was today's leading man. Fact is, he won the Academy Award, and until the next time, we'll see you at the races.